We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Freedom Day, the Prime Minister plans to end all coronavirus restrictions, including isolation, in 2 weeks' time.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Thursday, February the 10th. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
And leading your news this morning, the Prime Minister could end all coronavirus restrictions in a month, and a month early, in England. But will the rest of Britain follow suit?
Boris Johnson is among 50 people in Downing Street who'll be questioned by police over lockdown-breaching parties.
The Prime Minister is also heading to Poland to reassure Eastern Europe it has the UK's support amid fears of a Russian invasion in Ukraine.
Can a diplomatic breakthrough be reached? We'll be talking to the Defence Secretary later on in the programme.
And the West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma is fined and his cats are taken away by the RSPCA after video emerged of him kicking his pet. Should he face any further punishment? Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to the programme on this Thursday morning. So warm welcome, but it's very chilly outside.
It is, yeah.
With maybe snow heading our way.
You're quite excited about that, aren't you? Do you love snow?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Just
I like driving in it,
Yeah.
just for a change, bit testing.
Yeah.
You know, but if you're travelling anywhere, it's a pain, isn't it?
But
Really
it is quite nice.
Prime Minister's travelling, and he's also expected to end all coronavirus restrictions in 2 weeks in England.
Yeah, Boris Johnson says he'll present the government's Living with COVID plan after the parliamentary recess later this month. Well, our political correspondent Tom Harwood joins us live from Downing Street with the very latest on this. Tom, it's interesting, isn't it? There is no plan on how to live with it yet, because this has come as a bit of a surprise, this announcement. Even Sage said that they hadn't been questioned on whether or not it should go ahead, the scientific advisors for the government. What do you make of that?
Yes, it certainly seems like this is a political decision, but ultimately these decisions do have to be made by politicians at the end of the day. Scientific advisors can advise, other advisors can advise, economic advisors or anyone else, but ultimately it is politicians that need to make those big calls. And yes, this is something that came as a surprise, not just to some members of SAGE yesterday, but also to devolved authorities in Scotland, in Northern Ireland and in Wales, and indeed to some ministers who were not expecting this at all. This was kept a pretty tight lid on in order to be announced at Prime Minister's questions, no doubt in part to try and move this conversation on from the Partygate stories that continue to drip out and that continue to make a bit of a nightmare for this Prime Minister. This Prime Minister is also, of course, off to Brussels and Warsaw today as the parliamentary recess, that half-term recess, starts this afternoon. Certainly, politics doesn't slow down.
You know, but it is interesting, Tom, getting back to the COVID situation, that almost deliberately the Scottish advice in all of this, they're extending restrictions right into September.
It does seem that there is a bit of a difference for the sake of it policy between particularly Scotland and England, and has been for some time now. While Scotland and England went into lockdown in lockstep at the start of the pandemic, in the last year or so these two countries have diverged within the United Kingdom. It's interesting to see, given that the data seems to be really quite positive. Talking to MPs, they have been skipping happy over the last couple of weeks that looking at hospitalisations, looking at deaths, it's better than even some of the best case scenarios that the SAGE modellers had put forward just a few months ago. So the Prime Minister's caveat yesterday at that dispatch box was that if the data continues to be as positive as it has been, and to be fair to the Prime Minister, the data has been positive. We have very, very few people in ICU. We have numbers in hospital falling. We have numbers of deaths falling. It does seem that if there were to be any time to hedge an end to the pandemic, it could well be now.
OK, Tom, and just on, you touched on it a moment ago, on Partygate and this latest picture that came to light during PMQs, although lots of suspicion about how much of a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, preconceived announcement that was with the Mirror and the Labour MP that announced it. But I just want to get to the bottom of this. There's questionnaires being sent out to 50 people, including the Prime Minister and his wife, by the Metropolitan Police, and then based on their answers, that will decide how they go forward with the investigation. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, this is the beginning of the Met Police investigation, that investigation that really delayed and curtailed the Sue Gray report a couple of weeks ago. This is the preliminary reaching out strategy of the Met Police. 50 people, we assume, including the Prime Minister, but anyone implicated in those parties that are being investigated by the Metropolitan Police. Now, of course, number 10 are keen to stress innocence until proven guilty. Just because a party or an event or a drinks do is being investigated by the Metropolitan Police does not necessarily mean that that was a rule-breaking event. However, the optics around this are not good. So these are going to be emailed questionnaires, not formal one-on-one questioning from individual to individual, but certainly around 50 people receiving those in short order.
Tom, thanks for setting the political agenda for the day and explaining that. Really appreciate it. The time, 6 minutes past 6. The morning headlines are these.
The West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma has had his cats taken away and he remains under investigation by the RSPCA after that video emerged of him kicking and dropping his cat. His club have fined him 2 weeks' wages. Reportedly, that's £250,000. Adidas have also ended their sponsorship deal with the defender.
The money is going to animal charities. That man was already in jail for murdering his fiancée. He's now beginning a whole life sentence for the murder of his wife 6 years earlier. Police began investigating the death of Diane Stewart after her husband Ian was convicted of murdering children's author Helen Bailey in 2017.
Boris Johnson says NATO must draw lines in the snow over the Ukraine crisis and not compromise its principles. The Prime Minister is travelling to Poland today to reassure Eastern Europe that it has the UK's support amid fears of a Russian invasion into Ukraine.
A powerful drug combination of breast cancer could save thousands of lives, according to a new study. The research found if a drug called Keytruda is given in combination with chemotherapy, it can reduce the chance of the disease coming back.
Anti-Semitic abuse hit a record high in 2021. That's up a third from the year before. Home Secretary Priti Patel says statistics are shocking and a stark reminder that racism against Jewish people has not been eradicated.
Britain's first 100-mile-an-hour eco-trains are travelling between London and Aylesbury today. The trains are powered by battery and diesel, and it's claimed they will reduce emissions by 25%.
I live next to a railway line, and so when I hear about hybrid electric trains, I get really excited, and I think, will they be quieter?
Yeah, that's what you're looking for.
Trains are so noisy. Because I actually find electric cars a bit disconcerting in how quiet they are, because I always think I might step out into the road with my kids and not realise a car's coming, but a train, I'm all for it.
But do you get to a stage when Isabel says there's a train track, I mean, she basically lives on a train line, basically.
I've got triple glazing, so unless the windows are open, you don't know.
So say you're in the back garden.
Yeah.
How aware, how noisy is it, or do you become immune to it?
I'm immune inside the house, but if you're outside, we're also underneath the flight path, so basically you can't hold a conversation in the garden. It's a lovely home I live in.
Welcome to London.
Yeah, I mean, that is West London, you know.
There you go.
There you go.
The Prime Minister, as you've heard, is heading to Poland to offer solidarity and support to NATO allies as the Russian-Ukraine situation doesn't seem to go away. Doesn't seem to be doing anything, actually, does it?
Well, there's lots of high-level talks going on. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is also on a plane out to Moscow in an effort to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this report.
Training for urban warfare. These are some of the 250 British troops currently stationed in Poland. They'll soon be joined by another 350 Royal Marines who are preparing to head out to Poland in the days ahead. In nearby Estonia, another 900 British troops have been training with NATO colleagues. It is a British show of solidarity with its allies in the region, as Russia shows no sign of reducing its military build-up on the border with Ukraine. Boris Johnson will take that message of solidarity with him to Poland as he meets troops and political counterparts there this morning. His foreign and defence secretaries will continue the diplomatic efforts in Moscow. The UK's former Chief of the General Staff said despite the continued Russian military build-up, he's confident a diplomatic solution will be found.
I believe this was always a situation where Putin was going to assemble force, he was going to intimidate, he was going to bully, he was going to threaten, and he's actually in a much stronger position like that. If he moves in, the Ukrainians will fight, the body bags will flow back to Russia, and he will be in a Chechnya, Georgia type situation.
More Russian naval forces are continuing their transit towards the Black Sea, despite claims by the French president that he'd secured assurances from Vladimir Putin that there would be no further military escalation, claims rejected by the Kremlin.
For the British government, there is a tricky balance to be struck. Yes, of course, keep up the diplomacy, hence the Foreign and Defence Secretary's visits to Moscow. But they also don't want to be seen to be rewarding Russian aggression. That's why this visit to Poland by the Prime Minister is seen as vital in offering full support to understandably nervous allies in the region.
And in the meantime, Britain is also continuing to send more military assistance to Ukraine in the form of weapons systems like these anti-tank missiles.
Today we have the honour to receive yet another plane which arrived from Britain. All our efforts are focused on making sure the enemy understands that Ukraine is supported by our partners, and we feel this support on all levels.
As Russia continues with what it claims are scheduled military manoeuvres, Ukraine today begins its own large-scale exercises along its eastern border. With so much in the way of rival firepower within sight of each other, the risk of miscalculation is ever present. Mark White, GB News.
Let's now speak to James Beardsworth. James, good morning to you. James is a reporter at the Moscow Times, and he's going to give us his take on all of this. Look, James, seriously, what is the point of Boris Johnson popping up in Ukraine and Poland and saying he's got 350 troops on offer?
Well, I think there'll be other things on the agenda as well as the troops. I think there'll be two things that will be sort of on Boris Johnson's lips today when he meets President Duda. I think the first of those will obviously be the sort of, we're set to see as starting today, some sort of military drills take place just over the Polish border in Belarus, in Russia's closest ally, where Russia have sent 30,000 troops. So that will certainly be something that will be on the lips of Boris Johnson. The second thing that I think he'll be wanting to speak to President Duda about is just making sure that eastern NATO flank is prepared for any potential invasion, a sort of contingency plan put in place for any sort of further escalation.
So really, we are talking war games here.
I wouldn't go as far to say as war games. That seems sort of a quite inflammatory thing to say. I would say that it's just making sure that in the event of a Russian invasion or any kind of further escalation, that Poland and Britain, being close allies, are sort of readied.
OK, talk to us a little bit about our Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. She's arrived in Moscow. She'll be holding a press conference a little bit later on with Sergei Lavrov. Of course, over in the UK, we view him very much as a puppet of President Putin, not really having a great deal of power. What do you think could come from that press conference? And, should we really be focusing our attention to where we're seeing these, I don't know if you don't want to call them war games, but exercises beginning in Belarus and the like today?
Well, obviously, Liz Truss in the last week has spoken in the British Parliament about readying this enormous package of sanctions against the British state. She's talked about not only targeting individuals linked to the Kremlin, but also state companies or companies linked to the Kremlin. That will concern parts of Putin's inner circle who do have sort of links to London. For so long, the British state has kind of just turned its head where illicit Russian money flowing through London is concerned. So this is quite a seminal moment. But I think actually Lavrov and the sort of Russian foreign ministry have said that they don't like this tone that's come from UK officials. Rather, what they would do is they'd rather sit around a negotiation table and they'd like to talk about how they can sort of diplomatically come to this end where there's a guarantee given from the US, NATO, that the Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO.
Yeah, well, of course they'd like to do that, but they don't get to dictate the outcome for a sovereign nation. So, I mean, it's just nonsense.
Absolutely, but I think we can also understand Russia's concerns here. They feel that they've been betrayed at the end of the Cold War. There was a kind of verbal agreement put in place that NATO wouldn't further expand eastwards. Now, we've seen that has happened. We've seen the Baltic states join NATO, and now, obviously, there are, so to speak, if you want to say sort of Russia's old-fashioned enemy, the US, with troops sort of and military equipment pointing towards Moscow. So you can understand from a Russian perspective why this might be somewhat concerning, and then to see Ukraine potentially join that alliance is something that obviously President Putin and the Kremlin does not want to happen.
Yeah. You see, I totally get that, James. I totally buy into that. And yesterday, you were here and you were talking to a guest and you both said something like, well, it's obvious NATO is a non-aggressive organisation.
When does NATO invade?
Well, wait a minute. If they're sitting with tanks and missiles and everything around the border...
Defence. Peacekeeping.
Well, I tend to agree with James. If I was seeing it from the Moscow perspective or the Russian perspective, I would think, it's like a Trojan horse. It could be like that. But very interesting. Two sides to every story. James, thanks for giving it to us. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. With the time at 16 minutes past 6. Good morning to you on this Thursday morning. We're
going to take a quick break. After that, we'll be speaking to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley about the Met Police, what to do about the problems within the organisation. But first, here's your Thursday
And
forecast.
the snow may be blowing in.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update. I'm Alex Deakin. It's been a pretty lively night across parts of Scotland. Snow showers packing in and very blustery conditions here. We do have Met Office warnings in place. For details of those, check out the Met Office website. But this area of low pressure has been bringing the lively conditions. The isobars are really squeezing together, so getting very windy at the moment, particularly through the central belt, and then later this morning across eastern Scotland. Snow showers packing in as well. Ice is a risk across Northern Ireland, where the showers are falling as snow on the hills, but mostly rain to lower levels. Across Scotland, the showers will turn a bit more back to rain, but still over the hills, snow showers combined with those strong winds. That means blizzards and the potential for further disruption really throughout the day. Further south, it's by and large a fine day. A few showers across northern England, but much of the Midlands southwards dry and bright. A bit colder than recent days, and it certainly feels colder with those strong winds across the northern half of the UK. Still very blustery, with more showers to come across northeast England into this evening, but generally the weather calming down overnight. Clear skies, lighter winds will allow a pretty extensive frost to form. Certainly rural areas dropping well below freezing. A few snow showers continuing in northern Scotland. So again, potentially icy here through tomorrow morning. But for most, tomorrow is going to be a beautifully crisp winter's day. Yes, it'll be cold and frosty to start with, but we'll have plenty of blue sky around. It will cloud over a little bit from the west, the sunshine turning hazy. Maybe one or two showers in the west come Friday afternoon. But for most, tomorrow is going to be dry and bright with plenty of winter sunshine. Temperatures close to average, 6 to 8 or 9 Celsius, but the winds will be lighter. However, those lighter winds aren't going to last. High pressure bringing the fine weather on Friday is ousted by low pressure systems into the weekend. The isobars squidging together, so spells of wet and windy weather on the way for most of us this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, yesterday, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, warned the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, that she has days and weeks to save her job by restoring trust in the force and rooting out racist and sexist officers.
We are joined in the studio now by a former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Blexley. Very warm welcome to the programme. Always lovely to have you on.
Well, that was giving it to her straight, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it was, but actually I think he's boxed rather cleverly here, Sadiq Khan, because he's set Cressida Dick a trap from which she simply won't be able to avoid. And what I mean by that is he asks those two questions. How is she going to address the culture? He wants to hear those answers. And how will she regain the public trust? Well, particularly with regards to public trust, how do you measure that? whether they've regained public trust. Are they going to have an opinion poll in a month's time or 2 months' time? Are they going to rely on anecdotal evidence from people that they stop in the street? I mean, how on earth are they going to measure that? And also, Sadiq Khan will know, I'm sure, that coming down the line, there will be other investigations by the Independent Office of Police Conduct, Internal Affairs.
So she's done for?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and he knows it?
Yes. I mean, she's due to start a 2-year extension to her contract in April, which, of course, was awarded by the Home Office, Priti Patel. And Sadiq Khan doesn't actually have the powers to hire and fire commissioners of the Met.
But if she hasn't got his support, she hasn't got the support of the Mayor of London, you know, where she's based and what she has to do, it would be pretty unthinkable that she could continue.
Just as it was impossible for Sir Ian Blair in 2008 when he didn't have the support of the then London Mayor, which was Boris Johnson. And of course, even though there was a Labour Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, and a Labour Home Secretary, Jackie Smith, who wanted to keep Sir Ian Blair, once Boris Johnson had said this isn't working, he was done for.
So how much is all of this problem within the Met Police Cressida Dick's fault? I mean, is it right? Will somebody who replaces her actually be able to regain public trust and root out the racism and the misogyny?
Well, within the Metropolitan Police, the role of the Commissioner is highly significant, and they really are kind of the person that sets the height of the bar. And a Commissioner that's seen as a lame duck or ineffective will probably attract a very unsavoury nickname, and people on the front line are dismissive of them. So it really is, perhaps, unlike other organisations, when their head is almost just a figurehead. In the Met, it's a vitally important role. And I think now, for the benefit of the good cops, which is the overwhelming majority, the men and women out there on the front line, putting their lives on the line for the likes of all of us, for those good cops, I think now a change of commissioner would be a very powerful statement.
But Peter, if the commissioner is from that culture, the way Cressida Dick is obviously from that culture as well, I'm not, you know, it becomes normalised, does it not? I mean, you become blind to that culture. And I know you say people are good, and I believe you on that. But then there might be a language, there might be a behaviour that has just always been there. And they don't, you know, at a lower level, they don't see they're doing anything wrong, but then that grows to something that is just, as we say, to wider society, completely unacceptable.
Well, of course, I come from policing in the 70s, 80s and 90s. And we shared dark humour. It was how we got through very difficult and challenging days, invariably down the pub after work. And that, of course, is not anywhere near as commonplace as it used to be. But myself and a number of former cops and serving were utterly appalled by that vile and disgusting language that came out last week. We were shocked by it. That would never have had any place in our day amongst the chat, the banter of my era of policing. It was beyond the pale. It has no place in society, let alone the people that we trust to come to us in our greatest moment of need.
What about that detective inspector who came to the aid of Des O'Connor's daughter, Christina? So she's mugged outside her house. She phones the police. This guy arrives up and says, "Hi, you're pretty gorgeous, aren't you?" And tries to date her, whatever. You know, is that... What's your view with something like that? How unprofessional would you see something like that? And surely that would be instilled into your ethics as a police officer, that that's taboo or crossing the line.
It certainly should be. There is no place for that in modern-day policing. Yes, it happened on occasions. Back in my day, I knew that officers would ingratiate themselves to victims of sexual assault, for example. And it just feels distasteful, even going back in time to remember that, and other victims of crime. It is predatory, and there is no place for it in policing.
But he was, there was an inquiry into him, and they said, look, inappropriate, but you can stay on. He should have been just out the door, shouldn't he?
Well, whoever sat on that discipline panel better look themselves in the mirror and say, did we come to the right conclusion here?
But he's an advisor to Cressida Dick. No, that's what happened to him. I mean, that's what she is surrounded with. But I see the politics of all of this, and everybody will be happy because she has a 2-year extension. She'll leave with 2 years' salary probably as a result of that, and somebody new will come in.
But
And I think therein lies part of the problem here, is who is going to replace her. And maybe there isn't a suitable candidate out there.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it, when we're talking about the Prime Minister? But I want to bring it back to that, because for people who don't live in London and who aren't perhaps concerned about the behaviour of officers here because they don't come into contact with them, everyone in the country has become aware of the timing of this Met investigation into our government, the Downing Street parties. A lot of people have been very disappointed by Cressida Dick's judgment on this, the timing of it. How much do you think that will feed into the dissatisfaction and the judgment of her?
Unfortunately, all these matters, so many of which have been concentrated on the Met, do have an impact for the men and women on the front line in every town, village, hamlet throughout the length and breadth of the UK, because those perceptions that people will have will feed through and will make the job more difficult for those officers wheresoever they might work. And that's really unfortunate for them.
Yeah. Peter, always fascinated talking to you and getting the inside track on things. Peter's a former Scotland Yard detective. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you.
The time is 6:28. Stay with us. After the break, we're going to go through the newspapers with David Wooding and Emma Wolfe. See you in a sec.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.30 is the time. The front pages on this Thursday stack up like this.
The Mirror is featuring that exclusive photo of Boris Johnson next to a bottle of Prosecco as the Prime Minister is now facing fresh questions by police. It is also running an interview with Colleen Rooney about her relationship with her husband, Wayne.
The Partygate story. Just go back to the Partygate story. I just want to know why the man with the tinsel round his neck, are we able to do that? The man with the tinsel around his neck, he's photographed and the lady behind is pixelated. Now, David Wooding, you're a newspaper man. Why would that be? Why would you think?
Probably a more junior member of staff, and they don't want to implicate...
Well, she was there.
Yes, but there's a feeling that it's unfair to go for the more junior members of staff and to identify them. I think
Just interested. Thank you. We'll look at the Times now. You saw Liz Truss on the front pages there, and it's talking about how the Prime Minister has to respond to those police questions. The headline, PM amongst 50 set to be questioned by police.
Let's take a look at The Guardian. Their headline reads, COVID rules to be abolished in England after Boris Johnson's surprise announcement. The requirement to self-isolate will end in 2 weeks.
Independent, looking at the restrictions in a different way. Warnings from scientists about this move.
Here's The Express. They say simply freedom. They also asked the government to help us get back to normal.
Right, well, you heard from David Wooding, their political editor of The Sun on Sunday, and we're also joined by Emma Wolfe. Good to see you, Emma, who's a journalist and author as well. And guys, you've both chosen the Partygate, the latest take on that. Front page of The Telegraph, first of all, David, for you.
Yes, well, The Telegraph and The Times are going with precisely the same story, and that is about 50 members of Downing Street staff are to be questioned by letter by the police. This is the final stages of the inquiry into the Partygate scandal, and what is effectively happening is the police have spent the last week or so reading all the Sue Gray, Whitehall ethics chief's report on what's happened, and they're now going to send emails and letters to the people named in that report saying, is this a fair and accurate description of your involvement in that party? If they reply yes or no, then they will then be either given a fine, an on-the-spot fine of £100, which if they pay immediately, well, it's £200, but reduced to 100 if they pay it immediately, or it could go up to £10,000 if they're involved in a proper party organisation. So we'll get an idea in the next 7 days where it's moving.
And among that 50, the Prime Minister and his wife?
Yes, they're allegedly going to receive letters as well. The interesting thing here legally, I was talking to a lawyer last week about this, is it all seems straightforward. You don't have to be investigated. You don't have to be questioned by the police. You just say, is that right, what it says in the report? And you go, yes, and that's the end of it. But the question here is, if one or two people haven't been quite accurate with the truth when they spoke to Sue Gray, and then they say to the police, yes, that you can take that version, they are then officially lying to the police, and they're then perverting the course of justice. So anybody who hasn't been totally honest with Sue Gray may find themselves in a little bit of a sticky corner.
Emma, at this situation, at this stage, a lot of people watching will be saying, oh, who cares? I'm now wearied out by all of this. Have you lost that will, that interest, or do you still think this is important and relevant?
I think it is important, given that we weren't privy to the Sue Gray report. I think it's really, really important that, we get the truth at long last. It does beg the question, what have they been doing? What have the Met Police been doing for the last couple of weeks? They're to begin their investigation by contacting over 50 people.
Well, they've got to read that report, which the rest of us haven't seen.
Which we weren't allowed to see.
Yeah. You see, what I have the issue with is that I'm now told the Metropolitan Police did not have to instigate this investigation, right? They could have had the Sue Gray report published, which is what we all, the public, the journalists, media, whatever, we all want to hear the details on that. But by instigating an investigation, it's then put the kibosh on everything else, which prolongs the agony.
Yeah, it prolongs the agony. Is this going to be in Boris Johnson's favour or not? Is it sort of prolonging the agony, as you say, or is it going to all just fizzle out? I think what's interesting is the fact that if the police decide to prosecute him, if he's fined, this may well trigger a new wave of letters. It's thought it may well trigger a new wave of those no-confidence letters from Tory MPs. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how the MPs react to what happens to the Prime Minister. I mean, this is the Prime Minister and his wife, as well as other, advisors.
There is always the risk this could go on and on. I mean, cast your mind back to Tony Blair. He was under investigation for something like 14 months, wasn't he? And the Prime Minister's already said, I think he's been quoted privately as saying, even if he is fined, he's going to stay in office if he can.
They'll have to send a Panzer division to get him out of Downing Street.
Yeah. Well, I was having a rather detailed discussion with an MP yesterday over coffee who was being supportive of Boris Johnson and saying Tony Blair ran into big trouble in the middle of his premiership. We've got another 2.5 years for an election, so things can change. The problem for Boris Johnson, of course, is there's been such a long run of this. He really needs a really clean run of great gains.
And there's a lot of other
reverses.
stuff bubbling under that hasn't been solved yet. There's sort of Wallpapergate, there's Jennifer Arcuri, there's all sorts of stuff in the background that really nothing has quite been put to bed.
Right. Kurt Zuma, front page of The Sun, the footballer, he got a knock on the door from not so much the old Bill, but the RSPCA yesterday.
Yes, they've taken his two Bengal cats away, which he was filmed kicking. But the problems are piling up now for Kurt Zuma. He played amazingly, astonishingly. West Ham put him in the starting lineup. I can't believe they did that. He's now been dropped. He's been given a £250,000 fine. His cats have been seized, and now the sponsors are turning on him. Adidas have torn up a boot deal now. I mean, can you imagine that the man who's been kicking his cats having a boot deal with Adidas. They really have done the right thing there.
I've seen the cartoon doing the rounds on social media that involves football logos and things. It's it is the point you're raising there. I mean, how can you have a boot sponsor and you're kicking a defenceless animal?
Absolutely, and Vitality have suspended their sponsorship of West Ham, and then his brother's run into trouble. The brother, Eoin, who did the film and put it up on social media, he's having a lot of trouble at Dagenham and Redbridge. Their fans are booing. Even his own fans were booing.
Do you know, Emma, if any good can come of this, any good at all, it is a realisation of, kindness to animals and treating animals well. I look at this and I think, big game hunters get off with doing what they do as well, and the contempt and the disgust that has been brought about because of this should be spread.
And the fact that it was being filmed and that it was obviously seen as, just a bit of fun, it's absolutely horrific. And a cat is just a little bundle of fur, isn't it? With delicate little bones underneath it. You can really do a lot of damage. It's just it's really, really shocking. And I'm not even an animal, I'm not a sort of animal person, but
you wouldn't wish
really
them any harm.
No,
look, I'm a huge cat lady, mad cat lady, but I just wonder at what point do we draw a line under this? The cat's been taken away, he's been fined £250,000, his reputational damage is probably going to last the rest of his career. Who knows how long the ban will be? Do we need to keep this proportionate? I mean, at the end of the day, the cat is still alive.
Rehabilitated.
100%.
And also, you don't want him to be a poster boy for animal cruelty, which if you interview anybody from the RSPCA, the stuff we don't hear about, the stuff we don't know about, what sort of person wants to harm an animal like that? So I take your point, but I think publicly he should be seen working now in a cattery or for an animal charity
That's
or
the only way he can
and that's
recover
what
from
West Ham should be doing. West Ham should be saying, I know that they're giving the money to animal charities, which is fine and proper, but he now should be seen to do some sort of, what's it called, social...
Community service or
community
rehabilitation.
Service, the very thing.
Yeah.
He should be seen, he should be voluntarily seen to do that and some sort of rehabilitation involved with him on that. But hopefully it leads to people being more aware of protecting animals and the cruelty that some issue towards them.
Let's look at the front of the Mail, Emma. You've chosen this story. We're leading with it this morning. Freedom Day could be the last of these, big releases. Maybe we'll never go back into any restrictions again. Who knows? Let's hope. What did you make of this surprise?
Yeah, forget Valentine's Day.
As the Mail announcing it.
Forget Valentine's Day. This is our Freedom Day, which is February the 24th. And this is when we officially leave the pandemic behind, apparently. England's going to leading the world out of the pandemic. So this is the end of all COVID restrictions. And it's actually a couple of weeks early. These curbs were set to be ended sort of late March. And those are going to be brought forward even to the end of February. Sort of mid-end of February, 24th. So here we go.
Here we go, but nobody else is going. Scotland are not going until September of this year. No announcement from Northern Ireland or Wales yet. So this is where, David, I get so cynical and I think, is safety involved in all of this, or is this just, point scoring? Is this just get me through the local elections and whatever?
It's quite a complex picture, Emma. You've got already the health lobby saying this is a bit too keen, a bit too eager, a bit too fast, and saying this could come back and hit us again in the autumn. We're not out of the winter yet, but the autumn later in the year. There is a bit of concern in those quarters. But Boris Johnson undoubtedly has been affected by the need to get on the front foot again, to give some good news to the nation. That will be in the front of his mind. He's also got the COVID recovery group of MPs who are pushing to open up, and the business sector who want Britain going back to normal. But I think overall, I think there's a feeling in the nation now that we're sort of coming out of this, and I think there's a fair wind behind this decision. A lot of people feel a little bit easy about it.
I think it's what people want, but is it right?
Well, yeah, time will tell. I mean, Boris seemed to have got the last one right when he kept us going through Christmas. there's just a feeling that we're over the worst, and I think people will broadly welcome.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Do we govern now by feelings? I mean, SAGE, who are the scientific advisors and the experts when it comes to COVID, have said they weren't consulted about this change, and it came as a big surprise yesterday. That being said, 5,000 fewer deaths in January than an average January. It does give you reason to have hope.
It does, and SAGE, in fairness to everybody on this, SAGE haven't always been right. Some of their predictions have been way over the top about the doom and gloom.
But you would think perhaps they might be consulted about something like this.
Yeah. OK.
Oh, well, that was...
Guys, thank you both very much indeed. The guys are going to be back in an hour's time, and then again just after 8:30 this morning. Any comments you want to make about what you've heard so far in the papers at GB News, get in touch.
Indeed. Right, now we're going to turn our attention to divorce. It's 6:42, and this week is actually Sexual Abuse Awareness Week, and shockingly, 1 in 4 women will suffer domestic abuse during their lives.
But with no-fault divorces coming into effect later this year, is there any hope of changing that staggering statistic? Phoebe Turner is a partner at Stowe Family Law, and she joins us now. Phoebe, is this a big difference? I thought that no-fault divorce was really the underlying theme, that it was sort of in effect anyway, whether it was law or not.
Good morning. No, it's not where we're at the moment, unfortunately. At the moment, we've still got a bit of a blame culture when it comes to marriage and divorce. So when you want to tell the court you want to get a divorce, at the moment you have to explain to them why the marriage has broken down. And under the current law, the most common reason is that the marriage has broken down irretrievably. Well, you have to explain it has broken down irretrievably. And the most common reason is unreasonable behaviour. And to persuade the court that the marriage has broken down, you need to set out your partner's unreasonable behaviour. So you have to set out things like, my partner's financially controlling, or they have abused me, all these types of reasons. So it sets things off on quite a bad foot. It can be quite inflammatory and sets a very negative tone from the start. So that's where we are at the moment. Moving towards no...
Go on.
I was just saying, no-fault divorce is a good news story. It's really good. Lawyers, we've been campaigning for it for a long time. We think it's very overdue. And if we have no fault, it means either jointly or together, you can say to the court, we want to have a divorce, and you don't need to give any reasons. So it's a much calmer tone.
How is that good news if, say, sexual abuse was involved in all of that and it was nobody's fault?
What do you mean it was nobody's fault? Because the sexual abuse is presumably someone's fault.
No, but what I'm saying, if there's a no-fault divorce and it says, right, so this man beat the hell out of you and did goodness knows what horribleness, but at the end of the day, hey, let's not fall out over it.
Well, you can say in your divorce application, we want a divorce, or I want a divorce on my own. So you don't need to set out those horrible reasons. So imagine if you're sharing a house, a bedroom still with your partner, who has been abusive towards you, and then they come home from work and say, I've got this divorce application, and you set out X, Y, Z, things could get even worse for you at home, at least in the short term. So it's going to be pretty bad if they're going to get the divorce application in the first place. So we want to keep things as calm and neutral as possible. And if you're going to set out all those reasons in the divorce application, it could get a lot worse for people who are very vulnerable and in the firing line.
That's so interesting. So there'll be hundreds of probably particularly women who will benefit from these changes to divorces. Just remind us of the case. I think it's Owens versus Owens. Now, bear with us on this. It sounds very specific, but it was a perfect example of why these laws needed to change, because Mrs. Owens really wanted to be granted a divorce, but her husband just simply wouldn't permit it.
Yeah, and he's dragged it out. They spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of emotional cost trying to get divorced. And under the new rules, Mrs. Owen would just say, I want a divorce. And it's extremely difficult to, what we say, defend a divorce, so stop a divorce happening with the no fault rules. So with the new rules, Mr. Owens wouldn't be able to do this. He wouldn't be able to drag it out and make a nuisance of himself.
Okay. Thanks very much indeed. Phoebe Turner there as a managing partner at Stowe Family Law. 6:45 is the time, absolutely exactly. I'm just looking in the papers here, and it says David Beckham was talking about his favourite sandwiches, and it involved baked beans in a...
In a sandwich? Oh, for goodness sake.
It was a toasted sandwich, right? I know, Isabel, it may repulse you, but is there any, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of a long working day, is there something that you would lean towards just to get by? For instance, I went into a cafe yesterday morning.
Did you?
I had
Without
me? Without you.
That's so unkind. We normally go together.
No, well, no, it was on my own. And it was a tiny little cafe. It could only hold about 8 people in it.
Oh, okay.
And I walked in and there was a woman from just round the corner where I live in Belfast. It was amazing.
No way.
Yeah. And then there was a woman from Croatia who wanted her
you
picture
spoke to everyone in there, didn't you?
Lovely. Anyway, so she made me a sandwich.
Yeah.
And it was ham, it was tomato, and it was lettuce, and a beautiful coleslaw over the top on brown bread.
Lovely.
And it was very nice. Normally, I think a really good sandwich has to involve cheap white bread.
My husband would agree.
Yes.
I don't like sandwiches.
No.
Yeah.
Do you not think that's weird?
No. I just don't like them.
What, do you bloat or anything after?
No, I just don't like. If I want something naughty, I'd like a packet of crisps or a chocolate bar.
Crisps.
If I was going for something naughty or a
cheap
pizza.
White bread.
That is
beautiful.
good. Yeah, that is good. And a bacon sandwich. My husband's got me onto those.
Hard to beat.
Yeah.
Liam and I could live together. We could.
Please go for it.
It's wonderful. But I'm looking here at just some of the favourites, and let us know what your favourites are. Fish finger sandwich.
Well, that is good. Yeah, that is good. Lots of ketchup.
Hard to beat. At GBNews, think about that. A mashed potato sandwich.
Oh, the texture of that.
Worse, an apple pie and custard sandwich.
What?
Yeah, no. Sick. Ham, egg and chips, that's a breakfast. That's not just, yeah.
Corned beef, fried dumplings and rice sandwich.
A Yorkshire pudding sandwich. No, there's some sick, weird
mad.
people out there. But, no, sometimes just ham is nice. Ham with a bit of mustard.
Oh, yes. Nice. It has to be very hot mustard.
Yes, and beetroot. I like beetroot.
In a sandwich?
Yeah.
Oh.
It can stain your bread.
Are you hungry?
I'm starving.
I got that impression.
The shop nearby us here in the studio opens at 7 o'clock. So
the countdown is
we
on.
Get fed after that.
OK, the time is, as you probably guessed, 10 to the shop opening. It's 6:48. The start of this month saw a fresh political crisis in Northern Ireland after the DUP's Paul Givan resigned as First Minister.
So what did all this do? Trigger the collapse of the power-sharing executive, and now the future of the Northern Ireland Protocol, bear with us, between Northern Ireland and the European Union hangs in the balance. Funny, it's been very quiet on this front for a week. I mean, suddenly it was going to be, we were going to trigger Article 16 and there were going to be all sorts of sanctions.
It didn't work, basically, did it?
Well, it hasn't gone away, Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, with the latest.
The Minister gives some indication of the quantification of
a government with no executive. Truly a zombie administration.
For seeking that clarity.
The irony of it all, a unionist health minister being applauded by nationalist politicians after pushing through an organ donation bill that brings Northern Ireland into line with the rest of the UK. Politics in Stormont have always been tricky, and the power-sharing administration is now on life support. As a building, Stormont is iconic. Its beautiful architecture and sweeping grounds are the envy of any British government. Unfortunately, the foundations of the bodies that were put in place were not good. Side deals done during the 1998 agreement, letters of comfort and continual inquiries trying to rewrite the past are coming back to haunt it. Add to the mix a piece of EU law, now known as the Protocol, that places a border in the Irish Sea and replaces the Act of the Union. All the quick fixes have now gone, and the Good Friday Agreement is all but over. John Kyle met with the Foreign Secretary last week and is a councillor in an area that still bears the scars of the past and believes the protocol must be addressed to stop a repeat of former mistakes.
There is a level of anxiety, a level of anger, a level of insecurity here. And although people don't talk about violence, if we neglect this problem, if we leave it and let it fester, then it would be foolish to rule out a recurrence of violence. Now, nobody wants it. People are talking it down. But it's important to realise that this instability has consequences in Northern Ireland.
No self-respecting unionist can either support the protocol or implement the protocol. And therefore, if the price of Stormont If the price of devolution is to implement our own self-destruction, then no credible unionist can do that. And that's why these institutions are in turmoil and disarray. And it is the protocol that's brought these institutions to disarray. That is what has destroyed the institutions, because it has attacked the very basic principle that things can only happen with consent.
Some parties are calling for fresh elections, but with no support from any of the unionist communities, no government will be formed, bringing Stormont back to the very same place. Tugi BD, GB News, Belfast.
Oh, that's very beautiful. Finishing shot.
That is very
there,
beautiful.
It? Yeah.
You know, I live behind that.
Do you?
Yes.
Oh.
People often look and they say that big building must be where Eamonn lives.
What, Stormont?
No, I'm behind.
Looks very similar.
The back. The back. It's a humble little hovel, really. That
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Speaking of humble and your sandwich predilections,
Yes.
we've had lots of responses in the last few moments. Paul Harrison, shepherd's pie and a sandwich for me. This one's from Hippie of Harefield. Banana and sugar sandwiches. Now, I can get on board with that. I like
Without
that
the
idea.
sugar, I could do the banana.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not like you to forego some sugar.
But I could actually have. I feel a bit healthy with that, so I could put
okay.
I could put brown bread with that. Can I just ask you?
Yeah.
Sourdough.
Love it. You know I do.
What is the point of that?
It's extra sour.
It's hard.
It's savoury.
Yeah.
I love savoury things, but you've got
It's
to
not
understand
savoury.
if you're not
It's
into
not.
sweet things, it's
not.
just no,
It
it's
just
good.
it should be banned. It shouldn't. Look, I mean, the very thing. You go to eat something, you say, "What are you eating?" Sourdough. I mean, it's repulsive right from the start. Sour. I mean, the clue's in the word. Sour. Yuck. You wouldn't drink sour milk, would you? Sourdough.
Someone help me. It's delicious. Look, each to their own. You know, you want to have baked beans in a sandwich? Be my guest. I'll have the sourdough. So this one, we've got, don't you bring in your homemade sandwiches, says Linda. You should have to wait till the shop opens. You should be cracking open the...
That's an idea, but that would
the
involve a
loaf.
bit of work, Linda. That's not a bad idea.
Doreen Curtis says, I agree. Baked beans and scrambled eggs on toast is a great emergency meal.
Yeah, but
that's
you have
on
to get
toast.
it. Yeah, but that's on toast.
We're
You need-
talking
you need the
sandwiches,
sandwich.
Doreen.
I mean, I think you're right. I think basically bacon sandwich,
another one.
fish finger sandwich is very good.
Jane says
Ham and
cold baked
mustard.
beans and a mayo sandwich and a cold baked bean and piccalilli sandwich. Ooh, or a cold chicken curry sandwich. I like Coronation Chicken.
That's Coronation Chicken.
Yeah.
You're right. What do you mean a cold chicken curry? It's Coronation Chicken.
Well, no, she's talking
Why
about
do
her
people-
takeaway from the night before and slapping that in. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Salmonella.
Yeah, well, anyway. We digress.
Yeah. 6 minutes now before 7. Take the break. Get an update on the Wagatha Christie saga. There's been a pre-trial hearing going on there. We'll bring you the details. But first, here's your weather.
It's getting frosty in two fronts.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update. I'm Alex Deakin. It's been a pretty lively night across parts of Scotland. Snow showers packing in and very blustery conditions here. We do have Met Office warnings in place. For details of those, check out the Met Office website. But this area of low pressure has been bringing the lively conditions. The isobars are really squeezing together, so getting very windy at the moment, particularly through the central belt, and then later this morning across eastern Scotland. Snow showers packing in as well. Ice is a risk across Northern Ireland, where the showers are falling as snow on the hills, but mostly rain to lower levels. Across Scotland, the showers will turn a bit more back to rain, but still over the hills, snow showers combined with those strong winds. That means blizzards and the potential for further disruption really throughout the day. Further south, it's by and large a fine day. A few showers across northern England, but much of the middle and southwards dry and bright. A bit colder than recent days, and it certainly feels colder with those strong winds across the northern half of the UK. Still very blustery, with more showers to come across northeast England into this evening, but generally the weather calming down overnight. Clear skies, lighter winds will allow a pretty extensive frost to form. Certainly rural areas dropping well below freezing. A few snow showers continuing in northern Scotland, so again potentially icy here through tomorrow morning, but for most, tomorrow's going to be a beautifully crisp winter's day. Yes, it'll be cold and frosty to start with, but we'll have plenty of blue sky around. It will cloud over a little bit from the west, the sunshine turning hazy, maybe 1 or 2 showers in the west come Friday afternoon. But for most, tomorrow's going to be dry and bright with plenty of winter sunshine. Temperatures close to average, 6 to 8 or 9 Celsius, but the winds will be lighter. However, those lighter winds aren't going to last. High pressure bringing the fine weather on Friday is ousted by low pressure systems into the weekend. The isobars squidging together, so spells of wet and windy weather on the way for most of us this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Freedom Day, the Prime Minister plans to end all coronavirus restrictions, including isolation, this month.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes to 7 on Thursday, February the 10th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading for us this morning, all COVID restrictions, including self-isolation, could end in England this month.
So we're asking you, are we finally in the last days of the pandemic?
Or is it too soon to say that? Tweet at GB News.
Boris Johnson is among 50 people to face police questioning about parties in Downing Street following on the latest photograph to come out.
The Prime Minister flies to Poland amid continued fears of a Russian invasion in Ukraine. Russia beginning military drills with Belarus. Is time running out for a diplomatic solution?
And West Ham defender Kurt Zouma has his cats confiscated by the RSPCA after that video emerged of him kicking one of them across a room.
Should that be the end of the matter? 7 o'clock is the time. A very good morning to you. You're watching Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel here on GB News. You're watching it on telly and you're listening to it, hopefully, on radio. Spread the DAB word.
Now, our top story this morning, the Prime Minister is expected to end all coronavirus restrictions in 2 weeks' time in England. Boris Johnson says he'll present the government's Living with COVID plan after the parliamentary recess later this month.
Let's go to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Downing Street is his location today, in the thick of the action. Tom, tell us more.
In the thick of the action, in a pretty chilly Downing Street today. I'm a little bit jealous of Prime Minister Boris Johnson flying off to Brussels later. I'm sure it's slightly further south than we are now. But no, this is a pretty important day for the Prime Minister. He announced something pretty seismic at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, and that was, of course, the end to all coronavirus restrictions, including self-isolation requirements, as soon as in 2 weeks, providing that the data continues to be as positive as it has been. The Prime Minister Minister is basing his assessment off the fact that the number of hospitalisations have been falling, the number of people in ICU is very low, and of course the number of deaths is falling down now as well. A lot of the data that is accessible on the coronavirus government dashboards actually looks more positive than some of the best case scenarios that SAGE had predicted. So the Prime Minister thinks that now seems to be the right time, heading towards the 28th of February when this would fall away, all else going well. That could be the time that the pandemic is in effect over in England alone. However, of course, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland taking a different tack, and the critics of the Prime Minister saying this was in effect a dead cat strategy, something whacked on the table to try and move the conversation on from those ever going on conversations about Partygate.
OK, so the Prime Minister off to, where is he going to today? Poland?
Via Belgium.
Via Belgium.
He's going first to Brussels, then to Poland.
Right, OK. So,
and he'll be meeting with NATO leaders first in Brussels. First meeting with NATO leaders in Brussels and talking, of course, about that situation on the borders of Ukraine. And then on to Poland, one of our strongest allies in the region, and bolstering support, showing a real strength of support from the United Kingdom to those Eastern European countries who themselves feel threatened by Mr. Putin. Of course, Poland itself, bordering Belarus, had an issue whereby the Belarusian leader had been seemingly directing flows of migrants at the Polish border, presumably with the blessing of Mr. Putin as well. There have been high tensions in this region, and the British Army is committing further troops to help bolster the defence of that region as well. It's a very tricky situation, and of course the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is in Moscow right now as well. This is following just yesterday or the day before Emmanuel Macron travelling to Moscow as well, although he seems to be taking a less firm stance against Russia, saying that Russia needs to be more understood. Britain, however, in line with America, seems to be much more strong-handed against any Russian expansion and really trying to, not only with moral support but also with some troops on the ground, support those Eastern European countries who feel rather threatened right now.
Tom, thanks very much indeed. We'll leave it there. As you were saying, as Tom was standing in Downing Street there, we had a caption up saying get in touch, and we were giving you the email address gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet at gbnews. Now, somebody who's has done just that is Sue Ashcombe-Hurt, and we join Sue now live from her home in Cheshire today because Sue, hiya, how are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you, Eamonn.
Good, I'm glad, because I was worried. I saw your name there, Sue, and it's Ashcombe-Hurt. And I thought, what is hurting Sue? What is it this morning? Because I know you want to get a few things off your chest. Where are we going to begin, Sue?
We're talking about the cost of living rises at the moment, Eamonn. I don't consider myself a poor pensioner by any means, but these costs are really seriously worrying me. Energy is going up so fast and by so much every time that you're just frightened to put the heating on these days. I only put my heating on now for an hour every morning so that the shower room's warm enough for me to have a shower. I've restricted my diet so I don't have to use the cooker so much, and I can buy food in bulk rather than bit at a time. I don't use the car much anymore. Anything that I can do to stop using energy or food or anything like that, is something that I'm looking at all the time.
And tell us, Sue, are you doing this because you're seeing your bills rising already, or are you doing this because you're hearing a lot of the reporting about what is to come and getting yourself ready, starting to save the pennies in advance?
Yeah, I'm getting ready for it. I mean, when I get my £200 off the government in December every year, I immediately put that into my energy account anyway. So that, that's what it's given me for, and that's what I put it into. And I try to keep into credit as much as I can before the winter. But obviously, we've been lucky this year because the winter's not too cold, and I can suffer cold quite well because I was brought up on the edge of the Pennines and never had any central heating when I was a kid. So I can tolerate a lot of cold, but a lot of old people can't.
Yeah, and there might be some snow this weekend, so you better get ready for that. But, so you're obviously worried. I'm assuming you've no way of increasing your income. You've no outside sources to add to what you've got already. So you're frightened. You're frightened that you're going to run out of money, and you're frightened there's things you're not going to be able to afford. But what I would say to you, does this also just hit and hurt your pride and your self-esteem? You used to not maybe have to worry about these sort of things, and now you feel cornered by all of this and there's nobody helping.
Well, I do work, Eamonn. I still work at 70.
What do you do?
I work from home so I can do stuff when I want. But it's just worrying. I'll cope whatever comes my way because that's what I'm used to and that's what I'll always do. And I worry about other people who are worse off than me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're thinking if you can't afford it.
Sorry?
You're thinking if you can't afford it, what are other people doing? How are they getting through?
People who are just on a state pension, how on earth are they going to cope?
Look, we've been hearing reports, haven't we, in recent weeks that people's bills could be going up by as much as £700, up to £1,000. I mean, you've been making those savings, but how will that affect your decisions? Will you be looking at your bank balance and thinking heating or eating?
Yeah. I mean, I only have one hot meal a day now. So I don't have to use the cooker so much. But I think, at the end of the day, I've got quite a bit in now in the freezer. So I can eat, like fish and veg most of the time. Yeah. And that should last me quite a while.
Well, you've got to look after your health as well, Sue. That's important. But let me ask you this, right? Those are all the problems, and thanks for explaining them, and you really bring it alive for people. I mean, you're working, you're bringing in a wage, and you're still worried about, if you can afford things. But let me ask you this: if you were Prime Minister, right, what would you do? What would you do that you think could make a practical difference, that would make people feel secure, that would stop people worrying the way you are worrying?
Well, I'd get rid of the tax hike for a start that's due next month. I mean, I know for pensioners it's not due until the year after, but it's still going to come. And I think they need to do something about the energy supply. They ought to get back to fracking and get us some gas from home instead. I can't understand why countries these days rely on countries like China and Russia for stuff. At the end of the day, we should look to be self-sufficient and rely on ourselves. That's what us Brits do.
And what did you make of Rishi Sunak's plans? He's come up with this loan to the energy companies, which you then have to repay. He was described by the Labour leader yesterday in the Commons as a loan shark. What did you make of that?
Well, I am a Conservative, but unfortunately I agree with Starmer on that. I think it's ridiculous. And it's the same as the £150 from councils. It's not going to go to people who actually need it. There's a lot of old people who are living in properties that they've been in for lots of years that are above the D level. But they're still needing that money, But what's the point of giving them money when they've got to pay it back?
Yeah.
They need to do something to reduce the cost of the energy.
Yeah, you sort of lean towards, the profits these energy companies are making and sort of think, right, you lot help out, give it some of it back. Windfall tax, what do you think of that?
I'm not so sure about windfall taxes because presumably they're relying on them either to get more gas out the ground for now until we can get to renewable sources. and then they'll need that. And they did have a loss last year, so it isn't as simple as just, they're making a lot of money.
Sue, you are well across everything. We're so impressed with your knowledge on everything, what you're saying there. Spot on with all of that. So let me bring you on to the whole green issue and green taxes and all the rest. Look, we all want to save the planet. None of us want to harm the planet. But, you know, you talk to people like you, and at this moment in time, so many people, they just need... They need a backup. They don't need to be paying extra. Do we put the planet on the back burner for a while and just worry about dealing with our energy security and the price of energy and that sort of thing? What would you say?
I think we should get rid of the green taxes. I think at the end of the day, we are doing our best as a country to lower our carbon footprint anyway. And even if we didn't, our contribution is less than, 2% of the whole lot. And it's countries like America, Russia and China and India that are adding most to it. And the point, why should we be sort of bankrupted to get our carbon footprint down, which will be negligible in the whole world of things, when we can do it slower and get there without bankrupting us? It's the same with these cars, electric cars. They're not as green as everybody thinks they are, because the batteries don't last long, and it costs you $8,000 to $17,000 to replace the battery in them, and they only last about 8 years in the first place. So there's going to be loads of electric cars on the scrap heap after 8 years because people can't afford to replace the batteries. And I think the electric cars are going to be another diesel thing, because, they're looking at hydrogen and stuff like that. This is much cleaner. It only leaves water behind out the exhaust rather than all this sort of carbon footprint, actually building them.
You are an expert on everything. You know every subject inside out. It's absolutely brilliant. We could listen to you all day, but you get to that stage. Do you feel better having got some of that off your chest?
It's always nice talking to you, Eamonn and Isabel.
Oh, well, come back again anytime.
Listen, it says you're in Cheshire. Cheshire's a big place. Where are you in Cheshire?
I'm in Sandbach in Cheshire.
Oh, I know it very well. You go up the motorway and there's always the big sign. I go up to Cheshire quite a lot, so I do.
Well, you can always pop in for a cup of tea, Eamonn.
Well, that's very good, and I'll know where
only
you are
if you've got a baked bean sandwich or a ham sandwich. Oh, sorry. All right. Misreporting that.
Is there a sandwich that you like? So we're talking about sandwich fillings today, and Isabel and I think it's hard to go past a bacon sandwich or a fish finger sandwich.
Can't beat them.
Do you have a particular type of sandwich that you think's worth?
I like chicken, spring onion and lettuce.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
You've just reminded me, I love a bit of spring onion in egg.
Egg mayo.
Egg mayo.
You can't go wrong. Spring onion in everything, as far as I'm concerned. Sue Ashcombe-Hurt, it's been so lovely to talk to you. And if at home you want to be like Sue, come on, talk to us about everything from hydrogen cars to spring onions.
Yeah,
do that. Pick up the phone.
Solution.
Follow that email address on the screen. Get in touch. It's been lovely, Sue.
And Sue, yes, and I just hope, and I can just feel your worry about things, and it'll be okay. Hopefully everything will be okay. And just thanks for sharing all that with us today. Big hug.
You're very welcome. Same.
I don't like the idea of you saying you don't have your heat on for the rest of the day as well. What do you do? Do you put a blanket over your shoulders?
Worrying now.
What?
Yeah, I've got a fleecy blanket that I sit with on my knees. I go to bed early with a hot water bottle.
I love a hot water bottle. Yeah.
I can watch GB News on the telly in my bedroom. I do that every night from 9 till...
Oh, Dan Wootton will be thrilled.
But I can't answer them back because my iPad won't do email back to him. So,
well, we'll tell him. We'll
try to work out why.
Your goodwill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Great
Thank you,
talking to you.
Sue.
God bless
All
Sue.
the best.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
And you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that was lovely. That was lovely.
Nice.
Please, it is lovely talking to you. It's lovely listening to real people, real stories, real concerns.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
It's 7:15 on radio and on TV. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
OK, we're going to turn our attention to foreign affairs now. The Prime Minister is heading to Poland this morning via Brussels. He's going to be offering solidarity and support to NATO allies in the region. This is, of course, as Russia is beginning military drills today with Belarus.
The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is in Moscow already in an effort to find a peaceful solution to the escalating crisis. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, with this report.
Training for urban warfare. These are some of the 250 British troops currently stationed in Poland. They'll soon be joined by another 350 Royal Marines who are preparing to head out to Poland in the days ahead. In nearby Estonia, another 900 British troops have been training with NATO colleagues. It is a British show of solidarity with its allies in the region, as Russia shows no sign of reducing its military build-up on the border with Ukraine. Boris Johnson will take that message of solidarity with him to Poland as he meets troops and political counterparts there this morning. His foreign and defence secretaries will continue the diplomatic efforts in Moscow. The UK's former chief of the General Staff said despite the continued Russian military build-up, he's confident a diplomatic solution will be found.
I believe this was always a situation where Putin was going to assemble force, he was going to intimidate, he was going to bully, he was going to threaten, and he's actually in a much stronger position like that. If he moves in, the Ukrainians will fight, the body bags will flow back to Russia, and he will be in a Chechnya, Georgia type situation.
More Russian naval forces are continuing their transit towards the Black Sea, despite claims by the French president that he'd secured assurances from Vladimir Putin that there would be no further military escalation, claims rejected by the Kremlin. For the British government, there is a tricky balance to be struck. Yes, of course, keep up the diplomacy, hence the Foreign and Defence Secretary's visits to Moscow. But they also don't want to be seen to be rewarding Russian aggression. That's why this visit to Poland by the Prime Minister is seen as vital in offering full support to understandably nervous allies in the region. And in the meantime, Britain is also continuing to send more military assistance to Ukraine in the form of weapons systems like these anti-tank missiles.
Today we have the honour to receive yet another plane which arrived from Britain. All our efforts are focused on making sure the enemy understands that Ukraine is supported by our partners, and we feel this support on all levels.
As Russia continues with what it claims are scheduled military manoeuvres, Ukraine today begins its own large-scale exercises along its eastern border. With so much in the way of rival firepower within sight of each other, the risk of miscalculation is ever present. Mark White, GB News.
Look, with that, we'll take a break and we're going to be back with the latest sports news, Premier League action last night and Winter Olympics after this.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update. I'm Alex Deakin. It's been a pretty lively night across parts of Scotland. Snow showers packing in and very blustery conditions here. We do have Met Office warnings in place. For details of those, check out the Met Office website. But this area of low pressure has been bringing the lively conditions. The isobels are really squeezing together, so getting very windy at the moment, particularly through the central belt and then later this morning across eastern Scotland. Snow showers packing in as well. Ice is a risk across Northern Ireland, where the showers are falling as snow on the hills, but mostly rain to lower levels. Across Scotland, the showers will turn a bit more back to rain, but still over the hills, snow showers combined with those strong winds. That means blizzards and the potential for further disruption really throughout the day. Further south, it's by and large a fine day. A few showers across northern England, but much of the middle and southwards dry and bright. A bit colder than recent days, and it certainly feels colder with those strong winds across the northern half of the UK. Still very blustery, with more showers to come across northeast England into this evening, but generally the weather calming down overnight. Clear skies, lighter winds will allow a pretty extensive frost to form. Certainly rural areas dropping well below freezing. A few snow showers continuing in northern Scotland, so again potentially icy here through tomorrow morning, but For most, tomorrow is going to be a beautifully crisp winter's day. Yes, it'll be cold and frosty to start with, but we'll have plenty of blue sky around. It will cloud over a little bit from the west, the sunshine turning hazy, maybe 1 or 2 showers in the west come Friday afternoon. But for most, tomorrow is going to be dry and bright with plenty of winter sunshine. Temperatures close to average, 6 to 8 or 9 Celsius, but the winds will be lighter. However, those lighter winds aren't going to last. High pressure bringing the fine weather on Friday is ousted by low pressure systems into the weekend. The isobars squidging together, so spells of wet and windy weather on the way for most of us this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We're just looking at the front pages of the papers as well. The Metro has a good headline here, Rue Stunnett, and this refers to what is called the Wagatha Christie case. It's a vicious libel battle between Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney, both married to Premier League or former Premier League footballers. Well, shouldn't have started that.
One's a manager.
Wayne Rooney. One's a manager now with Derby.
We know
County,
what you mean.
And the other one's a Leicester City striker. And so there's a preliminary hearing in the
Yes.
High Court again today.
Yes, ahead of the trial that's going to be, I think, around May. And, well, it's being dubbed, isn't it, the Wagatha Christie saga. And it all began back in October 2019. Now, Colleen Rooney accused Rebecca Vardy of leaking false stories about her private life to the media. And our GB News presenter, Rosie Wright, is at the courthouse this morning with all the details. Rosie, just bring us up to speed. Bring us up to speed on exactly how Colleen Rooney launched this initial sting.
I'll give you a reminder, and you probably actually remember where you were when you saw that now infamous post from Colleen Rooney. It is sort of the war of the wags played out in painstaking detail on social media. Colleen Rooney had got really suspicious and fed up of the fact that details of her private life that she was sharing on her private Instagram kept making their way into the Sun newspaper, and she, and which is now, it's been dubbed this sort of Wagatha Christie, in an Agatha Christie style investigation, she conducted, let's say, a sting operation. She posted deliberately false stories onto her private Instagram, and she told us all about her methodology in this now explosive post. She says, for a long time, this has been a burden in my life. I've been trying to figure out Who is leaking these stories? It's been tough keeping it to myself, but over the past 5 months I've posted a series of false stories to see if they made their way into the Sun newspaper. And do you know what she says? They did. There's been so much information. I've been trying to work out who was leaking this. It's been tough. Now I know for certain which account and individual it came from. I've saved and screenshotted all the original stories, which clearly show just one person has viewed them. And here we go, the sort of Scooby-Doo reveal. She goes, it's ... Rebecca Vardy's account. Well, Rebecca Vardy was horrified about this. She calls Colleen Rooney, she tries to talk about it, then makes her claims public as well on social media and says, I'm so upset you've chosen to do this. I'm disgusted. I'm even having to deny this. You should have called me the first time it happened. Well, those two women, whatever conversations they had, didn't manage to get it sorted, which is why for the last couple of days this week evidence has been presented in this court and it looks like we're going to a full trial in May.
OK, so just tell us a bit more about that evidence. What have we learned in the last week? Because as you say, the plot has been thickening.
We've learned that somebody under Rebecca Vardy's team had a phone with lots of information, with text going back and forward, and then this poor person took a ferry into the North Sea to Norway or somewhere, and the phone disappeared. Fell overboard. She was ordered to hand the phone over to the court, and the poor phone and the poor woman lost her phone in the North Sea, Rosie.
Yes, I think depending on who you are, you might feel more fortunate for the phone, for the person who lost it, or for the defence case. Now, what's happened is actually a lot of the evidence that they wanted was on that phone, and it was apparently in the North Sea. A wave hit the boat, and it was Caroline Watt's phone. It was dropped into the sea, so we will never know what was on that phone. But some of the messages, and Caroline Watt, this lady in question, she was a sort of associate friend of Rebecca Vardy. She was a PR sort of media advisor, and what has been revealed is some of the text messages that those two women were sending. And they talk not only about Colleen Rooney, but also about leaking stories. In fact, in January of 2019, Colleen Rooney had a story that went onto the Sun newspaper about some damage to her car, and she posted on Twitter saying, I can't believe this has happened. Someone I know is leaking these stories. And what we can now see is an admission, actually, from Caroline Watts in a message to Rebecca Vardy, and I've got a transcript of the message here. She says, well, Colleen is calling herself a victim. Poor Colleen. It wasn't someone she trusted. It was me. So we know that this associate now of Rebecca Vardy has admitted to leaking a story, but that isn't one of the ones in question from Colleen Rooney's latest sting. Some of the language they use in those messages is not something that I can reveal, particularly at this time in the morning. But more than that, what we see from Rebecca Vardy is after that comment, that statement from Colleen Rooney going ... it's Rebecca Vardy's account, the response from Rebecca Vardy is, that's war.
Well, thank you, Rosie. Keep us in the picture how things are going to develop today. Thank you very much indeed. We'll talk again later. You see, this is why I believe you should never... I never say a bad word about anybody. I don't like bitching. I don't like gossiping. I mean, you would never see a text from me slagging anyone off.
Absolutely.
And that's why I just say, just be everybody's friend. That's the thing. And
that was my motto till I met you, and then you corrupted me, my mother, all of us.
Don't say anything bad. As my father used to say, if you can't say anything good about someone...
say nothing at all.
Don't say anything bad. 29 minutes past 7. Good morning to you. Coming up,
we're going to be going through your newspapers today with David Wooding and Emma Wolfe. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's get into the newspaper review this morning in the company of David Wooding. David's the political editor of The Sun on Sunday, and Emma Wolfe, who's a journalist and author. Very lovely to have you both here. Thank you very much indeed. David, you're going to reflect what many of the front pages have, which is COVID restrictions in England could possibly end by the end of the month.
Yes, 2 years of it now, and it looks like it's all over. Fortnight today. Boris Johnson announced in the Commons yesterday that it'll all be over by the 24th of February. The only little proviso is that if you're going abroad on holiday and you haven't been jabbed, you may have to go into some kind of quarantine when you come back. They haven't decided on that one, but that's a reasonable...
Yeah.
And what's your take on that, Emma? Not before time?
I think it's way overdue. I think we're learning to live with this now. I think it's been proven that the Omicron variant is much, much milder. Very, very infectious, but much, much milder. And I think that, for me, the focus now needs to be on all the other conditions, the huge NHS backlog, all of the other conditions over the past 2 years that have not been followed up, because we're going to see a lot of people dying from undiagnosed conditions, cancers and so on.
Right, so historic offences. We go to the front page of the Times there amongst other papers like The Mirror, which are carrying the picture of the partygoers at Christmas or at this quiz in Downing Street.
Yeah, so this is the Prime Minister and his wife and various advisors are amongst 50 people to be investigated now by the Met Police. This is the investigation that follows the Sue Gray report, which we haven't been able to see. And they're going to be asking them what was their involvement. What was their involvement in the parties? They have 7 days to respond to these questionnaires being sent out by the police. And there's being sent out by letters and email. And I think it begs the question, what will happen if the Prime Minister is actually fined for breaking lockdown laws? What will happen?
And I think we know the answer, don't we?
Will there be
Yeah, go on.
And will there be a fresh wave of no confidence letters from Tory MPs? And how this is going to play out and how it sort of feels to the public to have their Prime Minister possibly being fined for breaking rules that the rest of us had to follow.
Here is a story in the Mail, and David, this is incredible. I mean, this is futuristic science here. And Oxford University have smashed what is termed the fusion record. And this could be limitless, unending energy.
Absolutely. It's an incredible breakthrough if this comes off into a new form of power, because it will solve at a stroke the issue of rocketing energy bills and how we provide heating and lighting for our homes in the future, but also it will meet all the green requirements without turning to nuclear or fracking or fossil fuels. What they've done, this is one of those stories that makes your brain hurt, Eamonn, because it's so complicated. But basically, they've created a mini sun by using two elements from hydrogen, seawater, and they fuse them together, and then they have to suspend them by magnets because it's so hot, and it gets to something like 150 million degrees centigrade, which is 10 times hotter than the sun. And then in its sense, creates energy in the same way the sun produces energy. Yeah. And when they've done these trials, there's enough to heat thousands of homes from one of these generators. Now, they reckon they'll have this going by about 2030, possibly.
But where are they having it going? They're having it going in France?
Yes.
So I'm thinking, yes. So we invent it, whatever. Why are they building this massive reactor in France to actually make it work? Nothing like handing your good ideas over or your
always the way, isn't it?
Energy security again. So France is going to be building the reactor for this. But it is incredible. I just think it's so heartening to think that there are people who are not involved in the here and now. They're involved in the future, and they're just thinking about things that the rest of us are either too stupid or too busy.
This is why I like boffins, Eamonn. You always tease me for, you know, loving Oxbridge and loving boffins. Well, this is why we should celebrate them and we should raise them up rather than necessarily footballers or whoever, because these guys are the ones who are going to fix our problems. Vaccines, whatever it may be. What do you think?
And it's the kind of thing we should be focusing on rather than who was drinking Prosecco at which party. You know, it kind of reminds you that actually there are really, really important things out there. But it's a bit like these medical breakthroughs. They always say it'll be 2030. Although actually 2030 is closer than we think now.
Yeah.
But it always feels like it's 5 or 10 years away. So it would be great if this were a little bit sooner.
It's Oxford again. It's discovered in Oxford, you know, where the AstraZeneca vaccine was created.
Cambridge should be worried.
We'll be with that, yes.
The varsity battle is being lost, it sounds like.
But I think it is amazing. I mean, because in all our sci-fi programmes, this is the sort of stuff that created Warp Speed and Star Trek, that created Mr. Scott.
Yeah.
You know, in that engine room where you sort of think, you know, this is what they envisaged way back in the 1960s, and this is incredible.
We'll soon be getting one of those DeLorean cars and going back to the future, Eamonn, with the flux capacitor.
Do you know, my only problem with DeLorean car, I was filming with one a few weeks ago, is that I can't get into it. That's really, ever get into it, I can't get out of it.
Get out, yeah.
It's very low, but it's so iconic. I do say to myself, I'm going to promise myself, maybe when they do an electric version, I might get in a DeLorean car and a sort of hoist to lift me in.
I don't know what a DeLorean car is, just saying. So you're going to have to educate me on that, but we'll talk about that in the break because I know. Sorry. What is it? Why should I know what one is? What is
Made in Belfast by John Z. DeLorean. Featured in the movies Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
Oh, right.
Really low on the ground.
Got you.
Can't get one of those.
Yes, okay, I didn't know the name of it. The Back to the Future car. Yeah, I got it.
Sometimes I overestimate you. Sometimes.
I'm glad it's only sometimes.
Gullwing. Gullwing.
Let's move on. I don't know. Should we turn our attention to Prince Charles?
Absolutely.
He's not sure. Well, he is actually going to be moving into Buckingham Palace, but there's an opinion piece saying, and this is by Giles Corran's wife, Esther Walker, who says, why would you? It's horrible.
Yeah, so this is an opinion piece in the I paper. Apparently, Prince Charles, soon to be King Charles possibly, is not very keen on Buckingham Palace. And she's saying, why would you want to live in a palace? They're creepy, they're leaky. What we know about Buckingham Palace is it's pretty cold. The Queen doesn't like turning on the heating and tells people to put on an extra jumper, apparently. There are bits of masonry falling off. It's currently being renovated at our expense. This has been going on for a few years now. It's costing us around £369 million. Charles and Camilla currently live at Clarence House, I think. And they're not keen on moving into Buckingham Palace, but I think the Queen obviously wants the King of our country to live in the very seat of the monarchy. So, yeah, he's probably going to have to adapt his ideas some and move in there, move into the big
I don't
house.
think my heart bleeds, really. The problems that... Which one shall I live in? Clarence House or Bucky Peen? Oh,
it's got a nice back garden.
It's got a pretty nice garden.
It's got a swimming pool. It's got all sorts. And they don't live in the big staterooms.
Exactly.
They live in... The Queen lives in like a seven-room sort of suite. So I reckon those are pretty cosy.
The Queen will be familiar with this dilemma because, of course, and it was well covered in The Crown. This is how I obviously know it. The Duke of Edinburgh really didn't want to move, did he, into Buckingham Palace either? Because he'd done up Clarence House, so it's an age-old problem. Maybe they need to...
It would be like residing in a very big hotel. You know that big staircase when you go in, or whatever. Maybe you don't know.
In The Shining.
Maybe you haven't been invited a number of times. I'm just sort of saying. There's lots of areas to it.
And the Queen prefers Windsor anyway. She's not very keen on Buckingham Palace either. So
yeah.
Maybe they should demolish it.
Right, now this is interesting. We go to the Mail, and this is a story here, and this is about a brewery, Thatcher's Brewery, and they traditionally make cider. Right, all good so far. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is that the pressure group who pulled down that statue of Colston in Bristol have found that there's a slight link with the owner of Thatcher's cider. Now, Martin Thatcher is the fourth generation of the Thatcher family. Who produced the cider, is a member of a group called the Society of Merchant Venturers, and they, back in history, were involved in slave trade. Nowadays, it's an educational charity which looks after the care of the elderly as well. It does a lot of good work. But of course, this for the woke warriors of Somerset, and they think there should be a ban on this, or certainly a boycott of this cider. So
and harm all those old people who benefit from
yes,
this charity.
absolutely. So it's a step of maybe, the campaign going a step too far, which often is the case when people get overzealous in their in their.
Well, the owner of Thatcher's, he said they need to acknowledge what has happened in the past, yet continue to do the fantastic work that they do across the city. That's how he sees to be able to reconcile.
Well, I think you're going to have to close down the whole of Bristol if you want to cancel any connection to
Colston.
slave trade and
Yes.
Colston. I mean, all of the buildings are pretty much built on it. It's just exactly that.
So is that what you want to do? Is there any other way of dealing with this sort of thing? And I'm just looking at a bottle of Thatcher's Gold here, which looks very appetising. Looks very nice.
Even at this
chilled.
time of the morning.
Even at this time. I'm not much of a drinker, but I like a cider.
Well, they take it very seriously in Bristol. Of course, I lived in Bristol for about a decade, and the
10 years, you mean?
the cheesier, the better. Basically, if it almost tasted of stinky cheese, then you've
Cider?
got proper
I've
cider.
never heard that before.
Yes, because the stuff that you get on the market, the sort of commercial stuff, is sweetened for the non-West Country
people
folk.
like me.
But the people in the West Country, the cheesier,
They
the
like
better.
it, yeah.
It's fermented apple flavour.
Could you have an apple sandwich? We talked about a banana sandwich.
No apple sandwiches. I'm drawing the line at that.
I haven't heard that before. Yeah. Emma, we go to the Times, page 12 there, and this is coffee, fresh coffee.
Yeah.
What's the benefit?
So it's going to give you a longer life. So up to 3 cups of coffee a day could actually reduce your risk of dying from all sorts of cardiovascular conditions, heart attack, stroke, all of that. But the key is it has to be freshly ground coffee. So in the study, they found that people that drank up to 3 cups of freshly ground coffee, not instant, lived longer. So to me, that says there's a socio-economic link there, there's a wealth link. People that are drinking freshly ground coffee are going to be, in general, richer, more affluent, are going to be living
And they'd have a
possibly
person
healthier,
to do that, wouldn't they? They'd have a
healthier
person to
lifestyle.
grind their
Well,
coffee.
no, you can just have a coffee grinder.
Why would you do that? Oh, it's an actual machine that I'm not a coffee drinker.
Yes.
So it's an actual machine that
Yeah, I mean, the
grinds your
coffee
nuts.
machine out in the green room grinds the bean.
rather than instant from a jar.
Yeah.
Interesting point as well. You can have decaf, and it still works.
Does it?
Yes.
Yeah, it still works. It's just the instant that doesn't.
So you're a coffee drinker?
I drink 1 or 2 cups a day.
Well, that's going to be... You're not going to live very long.
No.
That's not
I'll
gonna
have
be
to go for
I'm on coffee
I'm going
number
to step
3.
it up now.
I'm going to live longer.
Yeah.
I'm on coffee number 3, but then I don't get enough sleep, so I think they cancel each other out. And
So are
probably
you
gonna
guys
die
on coffee? I
prematurely.
don't really understand the appeal of this, but are you on coffee because it lifts you, peps you up?
I
or?
just love it.
I just love it.
So now
Yeah,
you-
there's
you
no.
lick your lips
I
at
can't
it.
even
Oh,
explain
my
why.
favourite thing.
It's sort of without it. I'm not quite sure how I would function at 4 a.m.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't tell many people this. My lips have never crossed a cup of coffee,
Really?
ever.
You're very strange. You don't really drink alcohol or coffee, and for me, that's the only things I drink.
Stimulants. Stimulants.
I'm not interested in
Caffeine is
H2O.
extremely addictive. When you try and give up coffee, you get sort of very low mood, depression, all of that, headaches. It's a really, really addictive
But
drug.
so you get it because you take a lot of it, and then it's coming off it makes you feel quite bad.
I think so. I mean, when you're a child, coffee tastes bitter and things, and it's
Yes.
one of those acquired tastes,
still
and then
on
you
my
just
childhood
absolutely
mode, then.
You
love
are.
it. Good coffee is just a dream, isn't
My
it?
mother-in-law tricked me once. We stayed for a week, and she was making freshly ground coffee every day, and I was drinking it, guzzling it down as I do. But I had this awful headache, and I was in a rotten mood, and I couldn't. And after like 3 days, I said to Liam, "I'm not sleeping well." My husband, we've got to go. I can't cope. And then it emerged. She'd been feeding me decaf.
Oh.
And I was having actual withdrawals.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, without the caffeine.
I was
really
ill.
suffer
I was
it.
ill.
Okay. Guys, thank you both very much indeed there. Really appreciate that. That was Emma Wolfe and David Wooding with a look inside your morning newspaper's additional commentary on coffee and cider provided by Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster. Thank you. No extra cost. Right, the time is just coming up to 7:45 on this Thursday morning on radio and on TV. This is GB News at Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
We're turning our attention to Hong Kong now. A teenager says he was tortured by police and is calling on the British government to allow him to stay in the UK. Eamonn Yim was arrested after taking part in a pro-democracy protest and fled to the UK in 2020.
Last year, the British government started a special visa to help people from Hong Kong flee China's crackdown, but those under the age of 25 aren't eligible.
That could all change from today, as our London reporter Alice Porter reports.
We're in a war. No matter how peaceful your demonstration, the police will use different weapons, just like tear gas, water cannon, rubber bullets. The only way we can do is protect myself with my own hand.
Ivan is 19 years old and is claiming asylum in the UK, worried he'll be arrested if he returns to Hong Kong after protesting against China's national security law.
After I've been arrived to the police station, I cannot see my lawyer. And when the interrogation is going on, they put a towel on my hair and put the water on the towel, and I cannot breathe. And the only thing to support me to do not say anything is I know that if I say anything, this maybe will use as evidence to persecute me. I don't want my next 10 years will be like this. Some of my friends told me I can come to UK and then in the morning, and then I just buy a ticket to this night and then leave, because I have no choice.
Exhibitions like these in London help bring Hong Kongers together, which is sorely needed for Ivan, as his family are too scared to contact him.
Right now, what the Chinese regime want to do is want to make Hong Kong become a part of China and destroy our language.
Hong Kong is not China!
Across the UK, there have been angry protests from the Hong Kong community against the Chinese government. Hong Kong used to be a British colony, so when the government saw China cracking down on protesters, they opened up a special visa for millions of people. But it's only available to people who were born before the handover in 1997. So for young people like Ivan, they can only apply for asylum, and there's no guarantee they'll be given leave to remain. But the amendment to the bill being debated in the House of Lords today would change all that.
It affects people about 18 to 25-year-olds who are the most likely to be probably arrested on trumped-up charges of sedition, which basically means that at some stage they were protesting, a right which people in the UK, of course, should recall they take for granted here. There it could lead to a loss of liberty for some considerable time and persecution afterwards.
We put Ivan's allegations of torture to the Chinese government, but did not receive a reply. Ivan's currently waiting for a decision on his asylum claim. He's unable to work or study in the meantime.
I just want to be a normal person again, just like a normal 19-year-old student.
Alice Porter, GB News.
Seems wrong, that somehow, doesn't it? They should be able to sort that. I don't understand.
Yeah, especially since these visas are not available to kids under 18.
Age-related, I don't understand that.
Let's get into the sport. We welcome Paul Coyte here, looking back in what Premier League matches last night. Wins for Manchester City, a draw between Norwich and Crystal Palace. Southampton at Spurs.
Oh, don't look at me that way. I know what you're doing.
Oh, 3-2.
It's still painful for me.
Tell us about that one.
Southampton were fantastic. I've got to say, Southampton were terrific. I think Spurs made too many mistakes. I think a lot of people, including myself, thought, oh, yeah, this is going to be 3 points. We won't have any trouble against Southampton. But Ralph Hasenhüttl, who I'm a big fan of, has got Southampton playing really well. James Ward-Prowse is a fantastic footballer. I'm still amazed that not one of the top boys has managed to pick him up yet, because he's a fantastic player. Spurs, a lot of mistakes, I think, and Antonio Conte said that it was a little naive, but a great game of football.
And
I mean,
a great result
3-2.
for Man United and West Ham as a result.
Yes, it was.
Look, 5 goals there, 6 goals at Villa Park.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but when I'm watching a game of football, and if I see that there's cramp involved, then you know that they've been working hard. It doesn't usually mean that there's unfit players, but they're working hard, and it looked that way. I mean, it was, again, a really terrific game of football. 3-3, and Aston Villa were 3-1 up. Philippe Coutinho was brilliant. Leeds, they played the way that Bielsa wants them to play. You know, it was pressing, it was exciting. It was kind of like the gegenpress that's supposed to be happening at Manchester United.
No, but
they were terrific. So another a really good game there, 3-3. Also, I do want to mention that this is one that wouldn't normally get mentioned, is Arbroath against Hamilton Academicals.
Why do you want to mention that?
Because Hamilton started for Arbroath yesterday, while Hamilton also had a Hamilton in their lineup.
I've no idea what you're talking about.
A lot of Hamiltons.
Indeed.
A lot of Hamiltons. They might even make a musical about it. Who knows?
A win for City. Things looking very good for them. 2-0 over Brentford. Brentford on a little bit of a bad run.
12 points clear now, man.
Yeah, who's going to get them?
Yeah,
and Palace and Norwich at 1 apiece.
Yep.
Would that have pleased either of them, or?
I don't think so. I think probably more Palace. They're fine with that, whereas Norwich. See, if it had been earlier on in the season, probably Norwich would be thinking, that's a good point against Crystal Palace. But they come off the back of 2 wins. They need to be winning football matches now, because if they're going to get out of trouble, they need to be winning games at home. So 1-1, they were 1 up, but didn't.
Do you know who else needs to be winning?
I know who you're
Team
thinking.
GB.
I know.
What's going on? They're saying no panic. I'm panicking.
Are you panicking?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of people are less panicking and more, I'm sort of not really bothered.
Yeah, it's a week in and it's
We-
just not cutting through, is it?
I know we need something, don't
Shame.
we? There's Dave Riding who, I may have put the kiss of death on our snowboarding yesterday, saying, it's a great chance. And then literally, as soon as I came off air with you, then she was knocked out in the quarter-final. So I'm now thinking slalom next week. They're doing the curling at the moment, but that's a round robin. Britain's women have lost. Britain's men are playing now, but we need something, don't we?
We do.
Badly need to win something.
Where are we in the medals table?
Well, if you've got 0, I think you're pretty much.
Yeah, but I mean, our
Our
other
best hope
countries
is alphabetical order, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? And I was really hoping that it would just get Eamonn's juices flowing, excited about the Winter Olympics. That's mainly why I want something to happen, but you can see this.
Well, you're talking about the need for medals. Does Manchester United need Maurizio Pochettino to be their next manager? Because the story you've got now is growing rumours that there's a player push for Pochettino.
Right. Players obviously want their life to be as easy and as comfortable as possible. As far as Ralph Rangnick's concerned, he's coming, and also with managers as well. It's human nature. You would want your boss to be completely on your side, and you want your life to be as easy as you can. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to happen with Pochettino, but players like Luke Shaw have played with him and really enjoyed that. But this was back in the Southampton days. Maybe Ralph Rangnick is actually rubbing a few people up the wrong way and they don't like it. He's telling them what to do. Pochettino is a fantastic manager. We know how well he did at Tottenham Hotspur. He's at PSG at the moment. But I don't think he's going to become available if Manchester United want him, because then Ralph Rangnick would then move upstairs, unless they get knocked out of the Champions League. So they're playing Real Madrid. That's coming up soon. PSG, as a club, need to win the Champions League. Liga is a given. They're going to run away with that. But if they don't win the Champions League, if they get knocked out, I think Poch's days will be numbered, and then maybe I do see him eventually.
The only thing I always say about him is, what has he won?
Yeah.
And it comes
Spurs
back
won the Mercedes Cup a few years ago. So there's your answer.
Well, that's
Big
it.
shiny
That's it.
cup.
That's it.
We've got to ask you whilst we've got you, because we were talking about this yesterday, and Zuma back on the front of the Sun today, of course, the West Ham player, filmed kicking his cat.
Yes.
And what's the latest in all of this?
Well, the latest is he's been fined £250,000, which you think is a huge amount of money, but that's 2 weeks' wages. That's the most that he can be fined, because under PFA guidelines, the most a club can fine a player is 2 weeks' wages. So he's been fined that. The cats have been taken away. He said in his statement, how much they mean to the family. I can't put myself in his position, certainly because I would never kick an animal. But if my animal was taken away from the family, I would just move hell and high water to get my animals back, because I would miss them so much. So I don't know what he's doing there. And quite frankly, I don't know where we're going to go with this. We've also got the situation with David Moyes. David I wonder whether he regrets making the decision to have him play in the game against Watford. Now, the next game they play is against Leicester at the weekend, and I think he'll be taken out of the firing line. I just don't think they can play him. And as far as David Moyes is concerned...
again?
Is it a bigger decision? Is it a decision that maybe the board should be taking instead of David Moyes? Is it left to David Moyes to think, yeah, I'm going to pick the best team I can, but in situations like this, is it down to him to actually leave him?
Look, you know, Isabel made, I think, a pretty valid point. At what time, when does the pain stop?
Yeah.
The donation, the fine's been made, a donation to charity's been made.
His reputation's ruined.
There.
Yeah.
But, I mean, look, I'm showing you guys the stuff that's doing the round on the internet.
Yeah,
I mean, these are sponsorship jokes. And
you can't have anyone with a boot sponsorship or pictures of a cat or whatever. You can't. He's associated with something terrible. But I would say we need to be proportionate about it all. You know.
Yeah, I think he needs to be
contrite,
involved,
and honestly contrite, and be seen. If I was the
100%.
guy, immediately I'd hold my hand up and say, "Get me to a cat sanctuary. Let me be seen doing work there for a month." And you know,
and that should be it. But I do,
and that should be it.
But I do think we can.
Because I'm not a believer of somebody say, well, that's it, you're finished, you're cancelled, we're not going to see you play again. Everybody makes mistakes. It's a bad mistake. It's a horrible thing. But now it's time for him to say, right, now what am I going to do about this? I will go and work at a cattery. I'll do some work with the RSPCA. It shouldn't be down to the club to say, you should do this. It should be down to him to say, this is something I want to prove that I have a love for animals.
You talk a lot of sense, Paul.
Yeah, and some people don't talk sense. Some nonsensical stuff talked in this programme today. I'm going to show you something here. I want you to tell me what this is, right? Have a look at this.
Okay.
Takes a while. It's worth it. Well, is there any outside pictures? Yes, of course.
I know what that is straight away.
Yeah. So what is that?
That's Marty McFly's car, isn't it? That's the Back to the Future car.
Which is?
Which is a DeLorean.
Correct.
Right.
Right. Everybody knows that.
Yep.
Everybody except Isabel, who's never heard of that or seen that.
I know every moment and line from the film.
Except you didn't know
I
what the
didn't
car
know the
was.
name of the car, but if you'd have told me it was the one with the flappy doors.
And you didn't know that it was built in Belfast.
No.
Belfast?
There's films. What, did you not know that either?
Oh, yes, I did. Of course I did. Of course I did. Everybody
You're
knows
off.
that.
You're cancelled
I'm
now.
so sorry.
I'm out. We're all out.
Look after myself now.
Titanic, and we built the DeLorean. Remember that?
Titanic,
I knew
that
about
went
the
really
Titanic.
Well, that one, so,
With that, we'll hit the top of the hour. We're going to be back right after the break. Keep it
I like Paul.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Freedom Day. The Prime Minister plans to end all coronavirus restrictions, including isolation, this month.
Good morning. 8 o'clock is the time. We're just coming up to 8 o'clock on this Thursday. the 10th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning, all COVID restrictions, including self-isolation, could end in England this month. We're asking, is it too soon or too late?
Boris Johnson is amongst 50 people to face police questioning about parties in Downing Street. He flies to Poland today amid continued fears of the Russian-Ukraine situation as Russia begins military drills with Belarus. Is time running out for a diplomatic solution?
And West Ham defender Kurt Zouma has his cats confiscated by the RSPCA after video emerged of him kicking one of them across a room. What do you think his punishment should be?
As you probably heard, the Prime Minister is expected to end all coronavirus restrictions in 2 weeks in England.
Boris Johnson says he'll present the government's Living with COVID plan after the parliamentary recess later this month. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. He joins us from Downing Street. This was quite a shock announcement. Seismic, you described it as earlier, bringing the lifting of all restrictions forward quite some way. Why the delay in the plan on how to live with it?
Well, it's interesting. Back when the Prime Minister, at the start of this year, announced that in March he'd like to lift all of the final restrictions, he did say that he would do it earlier if he could. And this seems like a little bit of a hint that it will be happening. It surprised many people at the start of Prime Minister's questions yesterday, but of course we're still waiting to see what that plan is in terms of living with COVID. No formal restrictions, potentially some advice to people, a kind of voluntary approach to how we might go forward and manage this disease. Equally, it looks like it's likely that testing will no longer be free upon the ending of the self-isolation requirement, and it does look like this will all come in just 2 weeks' time, although that does depend on the data continuing to be as positive as it is currently standing. It's interesting that the numbers of people in ICU, the numbers of people in hospital, the numbers of deaths, even the number of cases are more positive than even the best case scenarios of some of those SAGE reports. So it is looking like we are on track to putting this pandemic behind us. That's certainly the hope of the Prime Minister. The criticism has been that this has been a political rather than a scientific decision, that this has been a convenient time to announce this when the Prime Minister is under significant political pressure. However, from the Prime Minister's point of view, all of these decisions have been political decisions. You take advice from scientists on the one hand, you might take advice from economists, you might take considerations of individual liberty and joy of life into all of these things, and ultimately it's the politicians who need to make the decisions based on various bits of advice that they get. And certainly that was a decision that appears to have been made for the most part yesterday.
Yeah, that's the advice and the decision being made in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, considering different advice and keeping their powder dry, except Scotland have extended restrictions until September.
Yes, it looks like that the strategy of Nicola Sturgeon may well be driven more by opinion poll than data. Of course, it's interesting. At this point in the pandemic, the country at large, in all parts of the country, has been more cautious when it comes to coronavirus. If you look at most opinion polls, people are still pretty wary of this disease and raise an eyebrow or two when the suggestion of all restrictions being lifted is mooted. So potentially it's an electoral strategy there from Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, saying that she won't remove all of these restrictions, indeed that she'll extend them. It's somewhat of a braver political decision to remove them, because of course if something happens down the line, and this pandemic has been incredibly unpredictable as it has gone on, it takes a bit of bravery to remove those restrictions. It's interesting, when we all went into these restrictions back in March 2020, all 4 countries acted in lockstep. We all went into lockdown at the same time. The advice before lockdown was the same time. There has been quite a lot of criticism about how care homes were handled, about whether that first lockdown was too late or not, and yet all 4 countries acted exactly the same. Well, since then, and particularly over the last few months, there has been a much greater divergence between England and Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. We saw that with response to the Omicron strategy, although potentially that was a political victory for the Prime Minister, given that England didn't fare too badly, even though it had many fewer mandatory restrictions. It will be really interesting to see if this continued divergence goes on between the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. How much longer will it go on, and how much more jealous will various other parts of the United Kingdom be of other countries if it seems that some parts are living life to the full and others are remaining under restrictions?
Yeah, and look, some people will suggest that the reason these decisions are taken out of step of other parts of the country, and perhaps without the scientific advice of SAGE, for example, as is the case here in England, is because the political influences that are leading these decisions being made by Boris Johnson are actually to do with trying to move the narrative away from Partygate. And yet here we are again, another photograph in the public domain. We're hearing 50 people from Downing Street are to be questioned, including the Prime Minister and his wife. You can see the Prosecco bottle there and a packet of crisps. This was in Tier 2 restrictions. This is when people were told specifically to have no Christmas lunches or Christmas parties. The Prime Minister is in hot water again, isn't he?
He is. This is the continuation of that Metropolitan Police investigation, those preliminary emails being sent out to all of those who they believe to be involved in those events that they are investigating. That totals around 50 people, not just in Downing Street, in the building behind me, but also in Whitehall as well, many of whom civil servants, some political advisors, and indeed, we presume, as well, some elected politicians such as the Prime Minister, although the Met Police is not confirming specifically that the Prime Minister has been contacted. It would be surprising if he had not been. It's interesting looking at that new picture from the Mirror today. It's not all that different from the picture that they published before Christmas of that quiz where 3 people were in the same room as the Prime Minister. It's just that a bottle is visible. Does that change the dynamics of everything? It remains to be seen, although the Metropolitan Police now saying they're adding that event to the roster of those that they're investigating.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, this was an exclusive picture. Pippa Crerar, who's led lots of these pictures, they quote Nadeem Zahawi, who gave an interview specifically saying this was not a party or a gathering because no alcohol was present. Well, this clearly seems to be in direct contravention of that defence.
It does. That is one media round of defence. I don't think that that's the defence that Number 10 put forward or that was said to Sue Gray. That is something that Nadeem Zahawi said in an interview. It does seem to stretch the realms of credibility that this is an entirely different event, providing that there was one Prosecco bottle there. The Prime Minister is sort of stood behind 2 aides wearing his suit, albeit one aide has some tinsel around their neck. So this doesn't look like it's an entirely different event to that we saw on the front page of the Mirror beforehand. And of course this was an online quiz. 3 people who were in the same room as each other anyway getting involved in that quiz, not a huge number of people in the same room. I don't think that this one is particularly the bombshell story that some of the others may be. Indeed, the former aide to the Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, took to Twitter last night to say there are a lot worse pictures than that floating around.
Ominous stuff. OK, Tom, thank you, as always.
Appreciate it. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other news today. The footballer Kurt Zouma has been fined 2-week wages by his club West Ham. Reportedly, that's around £250,000 after the videos of him kicking and dropping a cat. He's also lost sponsorship deals with Adidas. The RSPCA took Zouma's 2 cats away yesterday, and he remains under investigation.
Ian Stewart, who was already in jail for murdering his fiancée, is beginning a whole life sentence for the murder of his wife 6 years earlier. Police began investigating the death of Diane Stewart after her husband was convicted of murdering the children's author Helen Bailey in 2017.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has slammed opposition MPs for their support of a 13-day anti-vaccine protest in Ottawa. Truck drivers have continued to cause gridlock in the capital in a noisy demonstration against vaccine mandates.
A powerful drug combination for breast cancer could save thousands of lives every year. That's according to a new study. The research found that if a drug called Keytruda is given in combination with chemotherapy, it can reduce the chance of the disease coming back.
An ancient tooth of a child found in a French cave shows modern humans came to Europe 10,000 years earlier than previously thought. And rather than swiftly wiping Neanderthals out, we actually lived alongside them for more than 50,000 years. So, the Prime Minister is heading to Poland this morning to offer solidarity and support to NATO in the region as Russia begins military drills with Belarus.
The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is in Moscow in an effort to find a peaceful solution to the escalating crisis with Ukraine. And our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has this report.
Training for urban warfare. These are some of the 250 British troops currently stationed in Poland. They'll soon be joined by another 350 Royal Marines who are preparing to head out to Poland in the days ahead. In nearby Estonia, another 900 British troops have been training with NATO colleagues. It is a British show of solidarity with its allies in the region, as Russia shows no sign of reducing its military build-up on the border with Ukraine. Boris Johnson will take that message of solidarity with him to Poland as he meets troops and political counterparts there this morning. His foreign and defence secretaries will continue the diplomatic efforts in Moscow. The UK's former Chief of the General Staff said despite the continued Russian military build-up, he's confident a diplomatic solution will be found.
I believe this was always a situation where Putin was going to assemble force, he was going to intimidate, he was going to bully, he was going to threaten, and he's actually in a much stronger position like that. If he moves in, the Ukrainians will fight, the body bags will flow back to Russia, and he will be in a Chechnya, Georgia type situation.
More Russian naval forces are continuing their transit towards the Black Sea, despite claims by the French president that he'd secured assurances from Vladimir Putin that there would be no further military escalation, claims rejected by the Kremlin. For the British government, there is a tricky balance to be struck. Yet, of course, keep up the diplomacy, hence the Foreign and Defence Secretary's visits to Moscow. But they also don't want to be seen to be rewarding Russian aggression. That's why this visit to Poland by the Prime Minister is seen as vital in offering full support to understandably nervous allies in the region. And in the meantime, Britain is also continuing to send more military assistance to Ukraine in the form of weapons systems like these anti-tank missiles.
Today we have the honour to receive yet another plane which arrived from Britain. All our efforts are focused on making sure the enemy understands that Ukraine is supported by our partners, and we feel this support on all levels.
As Russia continues with what it claims are scheduled military manoeuvres, Ukraine today begins its own large-scale exercises along its eastern border. With so much in the way of rival firepower within sight of each other, the risk of miscalculation is ever present. Mark White, GB News.
We can now go live to Moscow now, where the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is having a meeting. She flew to Moscow yesterday ahead of talks with her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov today. There indeed is Mr. Lavrov speaking as we talk there.
Yeah, they'll be holding a joint press conference a little bit later on this morning, and these are just a couple of the many high-level meetings that are taking place right around the world on this very issue. We've got the Prime Minister travelling to Brussels as well today, as well as, we should say, the leader of the Labour Party, first Labour leader in a decade to do so, to meet with Jens Stoltenberg, the head Secretary-General of NATO. And then the Prime Minister heading off to Poland to continue those high-level talks there. But as we're saying, that is the live picture coming from the Kremlin in Moscow. There is Liz Truss.
At least they're not sitting at the big long
sitting
table.
Opposite each other.
They're not sitting at Putin's table.
Yeah, no Putin table in sight. And looks like with translation, that meeting is fully underway at the moment. We're keeping a close eye on developments as they happen in Moscow and bringing you all the latest lines as we get them.
And Liz Truss, of course, will be telling Mr. Lavrov there that there will be severe consequences if Ukraine is invaded. With the time at exactly 8:15, you're listening and watching Breakfast on GB News here with Eamonn and Isabel.
Yeah, we turn our attention now to the vicious libel battle that is going on between Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. They are having a preliminary hearing in the High Court today, and it may all go to trial.
It may do. It's called the Wagatha Christie saga. It began a couple of years ago after Colleen Rooney accused Rebecca Vardy of leaking false stories about her private life. GB News presenter Rosie Wright, we go live there outside court this morning. This is a preliminary hearing where both sides line up their arguments and see if it's worthwhile going to court. So far, Rosie, none of the parties have been talked out of actually going to court and settling.
Eamonn, they haven't. And actually, both of their legal teams probably would have preferred that to have been the outcome. This has become vicious. Parts of it painstakingly poured out over on social media. Both women haven't managed to come to a settlement outside of court. So this week, for 2 days, evidence has been presented here to try and work out, when that case comes to full trial in May, what we can see. And some of the detail that's been revealed is really rather nasty. And it started off in a fairly nasty way, a sting really from Colleen Rooney, which is why she's been dubbed Wagatha Christie, because it was sort of this reveal all moment when she posted on Instagram to say, I'm just fed up. Someone's been leaking private stories about me to the press. I've planted some fake ones and I've saved and screenshotted all the original stories, she says on social media, which clearly now just show one person has viewed them. It's ... Rebecca Vardy's account. Rebecca Vardy, obviously horrified by this, denies the allegation, says this has caused her significant harm and distress. She says, and then another social media post, this is how it's all playing out very publicly. She says, I'm so upset you've chosen to do this, Colleen, especially that I'm having to deny this. You should have called me the first time this happened. It seemed then, at least initially, but this is back in October 2019, that there was a step from Rebecca Vardy to say, let's talk about this and sort it out. That hasn't been how it's developed.
Rosie, now, as you say, getting very ugly, and we've been hearing more evidence in the last week or so, not least the whereabouts of text messages, and indeed their phones have gone.
Yes, not all the evidence that Colleen Rooney team want to have is accessible to them. Why? Because they wanted to get the details of text messages sent by one of Rebecca Vardy's PR sort of media advisors. Well, her phone, very shortly, and Colleen Rooney's team said this was rather unfortunate, her phone that they requested to have access to was dropped into the North Sea while she was on a boat. So none of that evidence will ever make it inside these walls or any other court, but some messages have been revealed. And what we can see is the details of the conversations that Rebecca Vardy was having with Caroline Watts, in which one of those messages, before Colleen Rooney started this actual sting operation, but earlier in that year, Caroline Watts admits to leaking a story to Rebecca Vardy. Rebecca Vardy also says at one point, I would love to leak these stories. Now, her legal team are actually saying, why would she say, I'd love to leak these stories if she actually was? They say that's proof to say, look, she wasn't doing it. Colleen Rooney's defence team are saying, why would she be talking about this? Why, when Caroline Watts says, I've leaked a story, does Rebecca Vardy not go, you shouldn't do that? Why did you not express surprise?
some of the language is language I just absolutely can't repeat at this time of day. And yesterday they were trying to say some of those messages, they're not about Colleen Rooney, but the language is bitter. And I can really sum that up when Rebecca Vardy said, after Colleen Rooney outed her supposedly and saying it's Rebecca Vardy's account on social media, Rebecca Vardy said, that's war.
Gosh, it's difficult. There's no winners in this, is there? It all comes out really nasty.
Plenty of winners.
Well, the lawyers,
plenty of winners.
the
Newspapers are winning. Hopefully, we're winning as well. A couple of you. Thanks, Rosie. Appreciate it. Steve Hunt and Kenny Parker saying this is not news. So wrong, boys. So wrong. This is over the front pages of all the papers, including the posh ones today. And people are absolutely fascinated by how this will turn out. The time coming up to 8:20.
Yeah, after the break, we'll be talking to our reporter, or hearing from our reporter, Alice Porter. She's been looking into the situation in Hong Kong. But first of all, here's your frosty forecast.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update. I'm Alex Deakin. It's been a pretty lively night across parts of Scotland. Snow showers packing in and very blustery conditions here. We do have Met Office warnings in place. For details of those, check out the Met Office website. But this area of low pressure has been bringing the lively conditions. The isobars are really squeezing together, so getting very windy at the moment, particularly through the central belt, and then later this morning across eastern Scotland. Snow showers packing in as well. Ice is a risk across Northern Ireland, where the showers are falling as snow on the hills, but mostly rain to lower levels. Across Scotland, the showers will turn a bit more back to rain, but still over the hills, snow showers combined with those strong winds. That means blizzards and the potential for further disruption really throughout the day. Further south, it's by and large a fine day. A few showers across northern England, but much of the middle and southwards dry and bright. A bit colder than recent days, and it certainly feels colder with those strong winds across the northern half of the UK. Still very blustery, with more showers to come across northeast England into this evening, but generally the weather calming down overnight. Clear skies, lighter winds will allow a pretty extensive frost to form. Certainly rural areas dropping well below freezing. A few snow showers continuing in northern Scotland, so again potentially icy here through tomorrow morning, but for most, tomorrow is going to be a beautifully crisp winter's day. Yes, it'll be cold and frosty to start with, but we'll have plenty of blue sky around. It will cloud over a little bit from the west, the sunshine turning hazy, maybe one or two showers in the west come Friday afternoon, but for most, tomorrow is going to be dry and bright with plenty of winter sunshine. Temperatures close to average, 6 to 8 or 9 Celsius, but the winds will be lighter. However, those lighter winds aren't going to last. High pressure bringing the fine weather on Friday is ousted by low pressure systems into the weekend. The isobars squidging together, so spells of wet and windy weather on the way for most of us this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
(24:08). A disturbing story now of a teenager who says he was tortured by police in Hong Kong, and he's calling on the British government to allow him to stay here in the UK.
Yeah, Eamonn was arrested after taking part in pro-democracy protests, and he fled to the UK in 2020. Well, last year, the British government started a special visa to help people from Hong Kong flee from China's crackdown on democracy, but those under the age of 25 are not eligible.
Well, that could change from today. Alice Porter will tell you more.
We're in a war. No matter how peaceful your demonstration, the police will use different weapons, just like tear gas, water cannon, rubber bullets. The only way we can do is protect myself with my own hand.
Ivan is 19 years old and is claiming asylum in the UK, worried he'll be arrested if he returns to Hong Kong after protesting against China's national security law.
After I've been arrived to the police station, I cannot see my lawyer. And when the interrogation is going on, they put a towel on my hair and put the water on the towel, and I cannot breathe. And the only thing to support me to not say anything is I know that if I say anything, this maybe will use as evidence to persecute me. I don't want my next 10 years will be like this. Some of my friends told me I can come to UK and then in the morning, and then I just buy a ticket to this night and then leave, because I have no choice.
Exhibitions like these in London help bring Hong Kongers together, which is sorely needed for Ivan, as his family are too scared to contact him.
Right now, what the Chinese regime want to do is want to make Hong Kong become a part of China and destroy our language.
Hong Kong is not China!
Across the UK, there have been angry protests from the Hong Kong community against the Chinese government. Hong Kong used to be a British colony, so when the government saw China cracking down on protesters, they opened up a special visa for millions of people. But it's only available to people who were born before the handover in 1997. So for young people like Ivan, they can only apply for asylum, and there's no guarantee they'll be given leave to remain. But the amendment to the bill being debated in the House of Lords today would change all that.
It affects people who are about 18 to 25-year-olds. Who are the most likely to be probably arrested on trumped-up charges of sedition, which basically means that at some stage they were protesting, a right which people in the UK, of course, should recall they take for granted here. There it could lead to a loss of liberty for some considerable time and persecution afterwards.
We put Ivan's allegations of torture to the Chinese government, but did not receive a reply. Ivan's currently waiting for a decision on his asylum claim. He's unable to work or study in the meantime.
I just want to be a normal person again, just like a normal 19-year-old student.
Alice Porter, GB News.
We can talk live now to Alice Porter. She joins us from central London. Alice, look, when people hear that story, it's an incredibly compelling case for asylum. How long will he have to wait for a decision, or could that decision that's going through the Lords speed things up?
Yeah, absolutely. Ivan has been waiting a couple of years, and sadly that's not particularly unusual for people who are in the asylum system. But from today, if this amendment is passed, which is part of the Nationality and Securities Bill, if that goes through, it would allow Ivan to stay in the country and begin a path to British citizenship, because his parents have what's known as British National Overseas Status, which was a special status which was given to some people in Hong Kong to allow them to keep a connection with the UK, with their former colony. Now, his parents have that status, and if they came to the UK as a family, they could all live, work here and begin a path to British citizenship. But the problem is, if you were born after the handover in 1997, people like Ivan can't come here independently. So you have a situation where families are literally being torn apart by the current regulations that are in place.
OK, Alice, thank you.
Very sad situation. 29 minutes past 8. We'll take a break there. After that, looking through the papers with David Wooding and Emma Wolfe. Don't go away.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Front pages stack up like these on this Thursday morning. The Eye, first of all, it says that the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, is amongst the 50 people that have been asked for a police interview into Partygate.
The Guardian is talking about COVID rules being abolished in England after Boris Johnson announced the requirement to self-isolate will end in 2 weeks.
The Mail also focuses on the restrictions easing, saying England is leading the world.
The Independent looks at the restrictions in a different way, looking at the warnings from scientists about the move.
Time to go through the papers now. Inside those headlines, political editor for The Sun on Sunday, David Wooding, and the broadcaster, Emma Wolfe. Very nice to see both of you. Right, David, it's the front page of the Mirror. They say they have the Partygate scandal exclusive. They've got the picture and the fact that the police are now going to probe the drinks party quiz.
Yes, there's a bit of almost panic among the political correspondents in Westminster, trying to get these first pictures of the parties, because there's suggestions about 300 of these pictures around. Everyone's in a state of euphoria if they get a whiff of one of these.
Yeah.
The Mirror come out with it first. Bit of a letdown, I think, as a picture, because it doesn't really show anything massively sensational, and the story's been dragging on a little while.
I think what it shows, David, it shows tinsel, and it shows a bottle. Isabel, in her expert opinion, thinks this is Prosecco. It could be champagne. It shows crisps there. It also shows hand wash. But what it shows is a good time was being had.
Yes, it does. Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's former aide, says this is nothing. There's much better pictures than this around. There's a bit of a feeling as well that there was among MPs that there was some collusion between the Mirror and the Labour Party yesterday, because this picture was put up on Mirror Online just around noon before Prime Minister's questions. I was on my way into the gallery to watch it, and then, of course, a Labour MP stands up and says, "What do you say about these pictures in the Mirror?" So had he been teed up? Who knows?
And for people looking at this picture at home, just tell us what we're seeing, because we had been told, hadn't we, that the Prime Minister did attend this quiz, but it was a virtual quiz. And were we told there were people in his office with him, but it's just the presence of alcohol and crisps, which were denied, we should say, in a series of interviews by the Education Secretary. There were no crisps, and this is Tier 2 restrictions. No one was allowed to have parties or gatherings of any kind at that time. And who are we looking at here?
Well, I think what it's going to show us is that what we're going to need to know is to see all of these pictures and then get the full picture, as it were, once we see the full extent. And of course, we're waiting for that police report to come out, which will give us. I
mean, as a photograph, it's hardly the silver bullet.
No, it's not.
Standing near a packet of crisps or even standing near a bottle of Prosecco is not exactly breaking rules, even Tier 2 rules. When you say a good time was had by all, it doesn't look like really much of a good time to me. I don't think that's...
Well, I think a grown man
party, I have
with
to say.
tinsel round his neck, he's up for a good time, I'd say that.
Well, yeah, he was hosting a Zoom quiz. I just have to say, I don't think that's going to be the photo that sinks Boris Johnson.
You see, if you look at Boris Johnson, let's go back to the picture here. Is it just me, or does it look as if he's about to
Taking his tie off.
Does it look as if he's about to read a joke from a Christmas cracker? That looks, you know, like a little tiny...
Oh, now you're talking. Now that's a good time, Eamonn.
That looks,
I'm glad I wasn't
read a joke from a Christmas cracker.
That could be the silver bullet.
That could be the...
Tell you what, I'm pleased I wasn't on the guest list
but
for
look,
that party.
I mean, Emma, you really demonstrate what a lot of our viewers and our listeners feel, which is this frustration that this story's been rumbling. We're a bit bored of it. And yet, do you think that there is an important matter at the heart of all of this?
The important matter is, he said this did not happen and no rules were broken.
Absolutely.
The important matter is, did he lie or did he not? It's not so much that these things happened. Whatever. He said they didn't. So it wasn't the event that's catching him out. It's the cover-up.
No, for me, it's not even the lies. More important than that is the fact that we were all following the rules and they weren't. They thought the rules, they made these rules and they did not think those rules applied to them, that they were above them somehow, that other people, and we know the personal stories, we know what people went through, not being with their parents, you know, in their last hours, all of that we've rehearsed so many times. To me, it's not even the lies and the deception. It's the fact that they were simply thinking, no, we can tell other people to do this, but it's not our problem. It's not rules.
I mean, and the
follow.
advantage they have is that people do get weary of it and they think, oh, we've heard all of this before, but it doesn't take away from the principal point that...
in a funny way, that picture might help him, because people say, well, if this is all we're getting upset about, then, you know, move on. Anyway, let's move on.
Front page of the Star.
Oh, we're not really moving on, actually.
Oh, right.
The front page of the Star is the end. So Boris Johnson, and I quite like this, Daily Star, been quite amusing. It's the end. So Boris Johnson is to scrap all the COVID rules that he and his chums never stuck to anyway, which is the truth. You know, yeah, we're coming to the end of these rules, but actually, they thought they didn't apply to them. But this is Freedom Day, allegedly, in a couple of weeks' time, February the 24th. It's going to be the end of these legal curbs. And this is signalled as England leading the world out of the pandemic.
Now, David is getting his teeth into page 5 of the Times, and it's about a tooth.
It's a tooth that's been discovered in the Rhone Valley, 54,000 years old. What does that mean, you might ask? Well, what it shows is that Homo sapiens were moving south during that period, and because they were mixing with Neanderthals. So what it basically shows is that cavemen were moving in the Ice Age to the Mediterranean for the summer holidays. They were travelling all that distance to stay warmer. Now, of course, the temperatures would have been a lot colder than they are now, but they would have been moving south for the heat.
And modern man seems to have lived side by side with Neanderthals.
With Neanderthals, yeah. Which again is a historic fact that we didn't know before. So it's quite a discovery, this.
You're one for the discoveries today.
You are. I'm so pleased you're doing that.
I know when you see 54,000, it's so easy when you read that in a newspaper. 54,000 years ago, you know, and you think 250 years ago Mozart was born. That seemed like an age ago. It was 1,000 years ago we were building these great cathedrals in the United Kingdom. I mean, 54.
This Neanderthal race as well is very interesting because it was thought that modern man annihilated Neanderthals. But there seems to be evidence because of this that they were able to live side by side. Neanderthal, very, very basic and primitive, of course.
Yes, and perhaps, you know, in the way man gets on with dogs and cats, unless you're a footballer, you know, the two of them did mix together and mingle it. But of course, we'll never know the answer to this. It's down to historians to work on the evidence. But that tooth does give us a bit of a clue.
Yeah, so interesting. I love stories like that. Emma, tell us what's going on page 24 of the Mail. This is a story about those bicycle trailers. Everyone will have seen them, parents popping them in there. In Holland, they're called the baker feet, the baker bikes. And bakers traditionally put their loaves of bread in. Now we stick our kids in them.
Absolutely. So we know that cycling's massively taken off, especially during the pandemic. But in recent years, you know, everybody's going super green, environmentally friendly way of getting around, and a really environmentally friendly way of getting the kids to school or the babies to nursery or whatever. But actually, it's been found that the pollution risk for children, especially low down, when you think of bike trailers, they're very low down to the road. The pollution risk can be up to 18%, those very, very fine particles, which, especially for little lungs, for baby lungs, really quite a big risk for children and babies. So they're not as green or not as friendly as we think they are.
Well, they are. It's just the cars aren't, surely.
The cars aren't. And the irony, of course, is that cyclists are the ones who are reducing the pollution, and yet those children are being put at risk. So the advice is very strongly is to wear covers if you're cycling through polluted areas, is to make sure that you have those covers on the trailers.
I never cease to be amazed by buildings, apartments, flats, whatever, houses built right on main road arteries, you know, the busiest places in cities, and they're just, you know, tons of flats and
schools as well. You know, people waiting outside schools with their engines running, and taxis with their engines running, and lorries and all of that.
I mean, for kids in general, just because of the size of them, being close to exhaust pipes, we've known that's been a problem for a while. We know that kids in prams often at the level of exhaust, but it is interesting,
Just
this
that
new
much lower
angle.
down.
We've got to sort out pollution for the sake of our little
Really
ones.
have to, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, David, you go into the Times. This is page 5, and this got us talking about sandwiches today. Brooklyn Beckham is getting a cookery programme on American TV, yeah?
Yes, but
he's not a cook, though, is he?
No, this is the 22-year-old son of David and Victoria Beckham. He's got an 8-episode programme on cooking, which he says he learned how to do during lockdown. And in the first episode, he makes a sandwich with sea bream, hash browns, and coleslaw. And it all seems very simple. It makes it all look so simple to make this sandwich. But when you actually look at the programme, it cost $100,000 to make the programme. 62 people to make the programme. 62 people were involved in the production of it, and he had a little crib sheet, a cheat sheet with expressions like whisk and parboil and little pictures to explain what it is.
Which is basically a fish and chip sandwich.
It is.
Yeah. So whether it's sea bream or what else did you say?
Hash browns and...
Hash browns. It's fish and chips.
Sounds like it needs some capers in it.
Chip butty with some fish in.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
One of the people on the programme says in this article that Brooklyn Beckham is to cookery what his mother is to singing, which is quite cruel, I thought.
A recipe for disaster.
Yes.
It's funny, we see it a lot in this industry, and that is the children of celebrities or very rich or very talented people kind of getting these gigs not through any talent other than who mummy and daddy are.
They're also big friends with the Ramsays. Gordon Ramsay.
Right. Well, you thought you might have picked up a thing or two from Gordon.
You just wonder, is Gordon producing or involved in this in some way as well as regards the format?
That would be a good show. Gordon Ramsay giving Brooklyn Beckham the hairdryer treatment on Gordon's kitchen. Anyway,
it just brings us to what makes a good sandwich. We think it's very hard to beat I'm sure a sandwich tastes very nice.
Yeah.
As long as it's not in sourdough. If it's just an ordinary
Oh, I love a bit of
sourdough toast.
It's what posh people. Here's another thing I don't understand. Right, the likes of Isabel, right, and her.
You're with me, right?
Sourdough. Did he just say that? He did. Sourdough. Absolutely delicious.
How ridiculous! It doesn't taste of anything.
White bread doesn't taste of anything.
Oh no, it's lovely and soft and beautiful and melts in your mouth and whatever. But then you get. This is the other thing. My wife is obsessed with devices and things, and I thought, what are these torture devices in the cupboard? You open the drawer and you go, what are all these things? They're yellow and luminous green and whatever it is, and they're for taking pips out of avocados, right? Now, what is the point of an avocado? Will somebody tell me, what does that taste of? How does somebody lick their lips and say,
I love avocado?
They're full of good essential fats. They're very, very
bad for the planet. They're bad for the planet because they're all shipped in by aeroplanes. The carbon footprint of people who eat avocados.
But my point is, they don't. I mean, bacon sandwich is bad for me, but it's delicious. Right, what is a...
Well, if you take your pip out with your torture instrument and just pour in some balsamic vinegar in the place of the pip and then use a spoon, you've got yourself a delicacy.
All the time.
I don't have heartburn all the time.
I know
I've never had heartburn.
She's got a twitchy eye. She's got an eye that just twitches all the time like that. She's got heartburn.
I don't have heartburn.
Indigestion. Because you take balsamic vinegar in the morning and drink orange juice.
Nothing wrong with heartburn, but I've never had it. But I do like balsamic vinegar and I do have a twitchy eye. So you're about 50% accurate.
You see, what an avocado is, it's an affectation.
No, it's not.
No, it's a status symbol for people like you and Emma who sit and say, we are of a different class. We eat avocado. We don't eat cornflakes.
I feed my baby avocado and banana, and that's a really good little mid-morning snack.
Avocado on toast is what my kids ate for the first 2 years of their life.
Avocado and banana. Banana.
Simple and healthy.
Yeah, and a bit of hummus.
Banana is a complete food. Mix in a bit of avocado. You've got good fats for their brain.
Yeah.
Great.
I think of the planet. I'm with David here. I think, why avocado when you can...
Oh, so you eat bacon and you think of the planet.
Yeah, but
red
avocado,
meat.
imported from Mexico, whatever. Anyway, but it's got us on to what makes a good sandwich. Brooklyn Beckham, I think his will be nice. David, could you top what he's doing there with sea bream and whatever else it was?
and the bread he uses, there's another one for you. He uses a bagel sandwich. Now, what do you think of bagels?
Well, I'll tell you, it's like I really don't understand why anybody puts something savoury like a hamburger in brioche, a brioche
Oh, I love
bun.
a brioche bun as a treat.
Too sweet. Yeah.
That's too sweet. What the heck's that all about? Sweetens. You wouldn't then put onions on it. Or
Next thing, we're going to be talking about pineapples on pizza. That all kicked off in one of my WhatsApp groups yesterday.
Yes.
Pineapple on pizza. People got very, very angry about that.
Defending it or?
Ooh, no, just very strong views. Australians
I do like
apparently
pineapple
love
in curries.
Oh, no, I don't like sweet and savoury.
No?
Pineapple with pretty much anything, I think, is a bit wrong.
Pineapple and gammon.
Except on its own.
That was an old favourite.
Where do I stand on pineapple on pizza? Fine with it. And banana on pizza. Had that in South Africa.
Yeah.
That was quite tasty as well. It's complete food, Emma.
Pineapple on pizza.
What was that advert that had the slogan? It's tasty, tasty, very, very tasty. It's very
tasty.
What was very tasty?
I don't know.
But we remember the song.
Did you ever have fairy bread, which was white bread, butter, and then
Sprinkles on the top.
Hundreds and thousands.
Yeah.
That one passed me by. No, didn't have that either.
There's that bread with the currants in it, and it's like you slice it and put butter on it. It's got like raisins and currants.
Well, you know,
I'm so hungry.
One of the things we're going to
bread
do
or
now
whatever.
is actually talk about food. We say goodbye to these two. Absolutely brilliant throughout
Thank
the morning.
you.
Thank
It's been
you
a
very
pleasure.
much indeed. And we're talking now about weight loss and how people are uniting across the country to fight the obesity epidemic.
Yes, this is a new campaign. It's called Break Free, and it's really aiming to tackle the difficult reality of living with excess weight and some of the stigma that often prevents people from actually getting help.
Former footballer Neil Razor-Ruddock joins us now. Neil, you're an ambassador for this campaign, and also there's Sarah LeBrock there as well, who's part of this whole organisation. And you've suffered, Sarah, with weight problems throughout your life?
Yeah, I've been a typical person that's lost weight and put it back on again, time and time again, throughout my lifetime, really. And it was kind of my own experiences that kind of led me to start looking into why this was happening, because I didn't believe it was just a case of I was eating the wrong things and not exercising enough, because I was doing things like Olympic distance triathlons and running 5 and 10Ks all the time, and my weight was still coming back on. So there's more to this than the simple messaging that society has about obesity. And so that's why I'm kind of really passionate about people feeling empowered to have conversations to help support them in kind of trying to lose weight and live a healthier life, because this isn't down to things that are in their control sometimes. There's lots of reasons why someone lives.
Do you think, Sarah, was it genetics that was the problem, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think genetics play a part in it. You know, both my parents have struggled with their weight. And when you look back, you can see that there is that genetic piece there. But it's also society and where you live and what jobs you do. And it's really complex. It's not as simple as just picking out one or two things. So I think people just need to understand that it's not simple and it is more complex than we think. And at the moment, society just really thinks it's about eating less and moving more. But
Neil, I just want to know from you, was it as simple for you as when you stopped playing football, you stopped training, that it was then a battle that then you were predisposed to putting on weight?
Well, I think it became 20 years before that, Eamonn. I mean, what they're saying is, move more, eat less. When I was a professional footballer for 20 years, I couldn't have trained any harder. I couldn't have ate any less, but I was still that 2 or 3 pound overweight, Eamonn. I could never get to my ideal weight, so that it is so true that, move more, eat less. And then when it doesn't happen for you, a lot of people go the other way. I go the other way and start eating more and drinking more, and this is a bind. This is too hard work for me. And it's but the break free campaign explains all that. I mean, it's amazing. Like sleep, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're stressed, if you're not getting on with your partner, all this can add to weight gain. And it's because I was beating myself up when I was playing. It was really mentally getting into me. That, I've got to train harder, I've got to train harder. I couldn't train any harder. If I trained any harder and ate any less,
but I bet you, Neil,
I wouldn't have been strong enough. I wouldn't have been strong enough to play. So, it was just a nightmare situation I've got myself into.
Neil, I bet you, though, it was all treated as a bit of a joke. People patting your tummy and things, and people saying, you have your burgers, you do, and whatever. And the idea being you were weak, you were deliberately putting this weight on, you weren't disciplined enough, and you're thinking you're as disciplined and committed as the next guy.
Yeah, I used to get all the football clubs I went to, especially from fans. But I used to have to do double sessions. Me and Johnny Artson, I'm sure Big John won't get the other one. Me telling you, Johnny Barnes. We used to do. Johnny Barnes had a bad injury on his Achilles when I was at Liverpool, and after he come back after 6 months, Johnny struggled with his weight. So we used to do double sessions, but because we couldn't get to the ideal weight for some reason that I didn't know, I thought I wasn't training hard enough. We were, and it's breakthrough campaign. It's they've got doctors, professors, and people just go onto the website breakthroughcampaign.com and read through it, and you won't beat yourself up so much. You'll understand it more. A lot of people, you get too big. A lot of people don't want to go to the gym because they're embarrassed of the size of them. They won't know what to wear to the gym. So it's all the help there.
Yeah, but look, this element of shame that you talk about, Neil, and I want to ask you about that, Sarah. Does that come from within, or is that from a society, as we're talking about, everybody oversimplifies this? If you just ate less and moved more, no, it's not that simple. Have you experienced fat shaming, and how has it made you feel?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think I don't like myself. I don't like the way that I look. And I think that a lot of that's come from the societal pressures of like Instagram now. And, if you don't look a certain way, then you're, not right, and you need to strive to look like that. And I think that pressure, from an internal perspective, you kind of are constantly trying to do that, but also from a societal, people kind of casting judgment and things like that. So, I very much speak out about obesity quite a lot now, and I get a lot of negative comments about you're just coming up with excuses, like, can't you just accept that you just need to eat less and move more? You're just talking rubbish. And, I get bombarded with this a lot, and it's just frustrating because you're just like, please just understand it's not that simple.
Yeah, but Neil, again, I think this is different for men than women. I think it would be harder to criticise or joke to Sarah about where she thinks she's carrying extra weight than it is with a man, because it's like nothing's off limits with men, and it's the idea you can't say this about a person, you can't say that about a person. But the one thing any of them can do, all the newspapers, I speak from experience here, there is no shame in criticising a man about his weight.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get fat boy, I don't mind it from the lads I've grown up with, and because they're all piling on the pounds. A lot of my mates are catching me up, Eamonn. It won't be long until they're my size, so I'll be able to get my own back. Yeah, but it does hurt me. It does drive you mad, and it sometimes, and also people try to give me advice about my weight. I take it as criticism. I take it the wrong way, and I think, well, I'll show you. Then I will collapse and eat more and more and more. So it's been an ongoing thing all my life. I've been on a diet for all my life, and it does get you down. Mentally, it's tiring, So it is tough, but you got to battle on.
Do you know, listening to this interview and having this conversation, I feel myself getting angry, and I get so frustrated to hear you, Sarah, saying that you don't like yourself. I'm looking at a beautiful woman, incredibly articulate, being very confident on a national broadcaster. You, Neil, having been a professional footballer, there's so much more to you than your weight. None of us should be defined by our weight. Why are we so obsessed with the way everybody looks?
That's another one thing I always get if I'm in the papers, or, you know, the overweight razor running, or if I'm doing anything, if I'm doing a stage, you know, if I walk on stage and doing a speech, you know, here he is, fat boy. People think it's a laugh. It's not a laugh. You know,
funny.
If you're a fat lad or you're ginger, you get stick.
It's the acceptable form of discrimination. You're so right, Neil. I also think you're right to bring up the thing about ginger kids. It's so unfair that people can make those comments. You couldn't if it was about race, you couldn't do it about religion, but you can do it about weight, and you can do it about ginger hair for some bizarre reason.
And also, you were talking to Sarah there about how she perceives herself and sees herself, and how maybe others see her. I mean, all I can see now is a very beautiful
Completely agree.
face, graceful face there. As for Neil, that's the beard, my mother's. That's it. But then I know other obviously beautiful women who are slim and who will constantly complain about their shape, Sarah, and they will constantly complain about a problem that really doesn't exist in comparison to many other people. So often you look at a woman who's size 8 or size 10 or size 12, and they'll be talking about being fat and being awful and being ugly, and yet they're not even getting there. They're not even touching upon it yet.
Yeah, I think the difference there, though, that's kind of like a personal feeling about themselves, which I think everybody has. I totally agree that nobody looks at themselves and thinks they're perfect. I think I think, you know, that's true. But I think the difference when you live with obesity is you feel that, but society also makes you feel like that. You know, I get treated differently by people because of the way I look. People make assumptions about me. People assume that I'm lazy and I eat too much and that I'm uneducated. You know, people, it's the judgments that are put on you as well. So although you feel a certain way, you're then made to feel even worse because the society thinks about you as well. And I think that's where it's kind of much harder for someone living with obesity, because you've got to kind of overcome that initial judgment the minute someone meets you before they can then see you as a person. And that's what I find difficult, especially kind of being out there in the kind of not like on TV or doing any sort of public speaking or something.
But look,
you know, you're just the minute they see you.
Finally, just to finish, Neil, I mean, you talk about break free. If people Google break free, 2 words, what will they get? What is it introducing them to? Where do they begin with break free?
First thing that springs into my name is education. We've got a podcast as well called Break Free FM. I mean, if you look at that, it's just being educated. When I played football, there was no education. If I was overweight, I'd try and move more, eat less. I'd wear a black sack under my training kit to train. I'd lose 4 pounds, get on the scales, feel brilliant. An hour later, I'd be 5 pounds heavier because I'd just putting fluids back in. That was the education we had at one of the greatest football clubs in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's just about education and moving on. And not, you know, it's a help to me, make me feel better. I don't beat myself up so much when I'm fine. I'm still learning, Eamonn. There's no, you know, I'm still going through it. I'm still learning. There's a lot there to take in. But it's making me feel better. And if it makes me feel better, it'll help everyone else.
Yeah, I hope you make people feel better. And thanks for talking about it. You made me smile when you were talking about Liverpool and one of the greatest football clubs in the world. I was working, no, it's not that bad. I worked for 3 weeks.
You made me laugh talking about avocados.
What is the point, Neil? What is the point? Avocados, what is the point?
So
but listen,
yummy.
I want to tell you a quick story about one of the greatest Liverpool captains ever, of course, Eamonn Hughes. And I worked with him for 3 weeks and we were staying in a hotel. And every day he would get up and he got me into this habit. Me and him would go jogging, would go running with the black bin liner. And I thought, well, if Eamonn Hughes uses this must be the greatest invention. So you'd put the black bin liner on your kit over the top of it. And for 3 weeks, that was me sweating buckets. Learnt by your football club and Eamonn Hughes. Guys, gotta go. Thanks very much indeed. Really appreciate it. And keep well, the both of you.
Yeah, really brave to do that. And like your dad taught you, if you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. My mum always used to say, look for the best in people. Why can't we be kind and look for the best in people? That's my That's my final thought on all of that.
OK, we're going to go to the break. We're back with the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, on the Ukraine situation right after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Freedom Day. The Prime Minister plans to end all coronavirus restrictions, including isolation. That's going to happen this month.
Good morning. It's just gone 9 o'clock on Thursday, February the 10th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading for us this morning, all COVID restrictions, including self-isolation, could end in England this month. The question is, too early or too late?
In a couple of minutes, we'll be speaking to the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace as Boris Johnson travels to Poland in an attempt to de-escalate tensions over Ukraine.
So, as you just heard, the Prime Minister is heading to Poland this morning to offer solidarity and support to NATO allies as Russia begins military drills with Belarus.
The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is in Moscow. She's in a meeting with Sergei Lavrov at the moment, trying to find a peaceful solution to the ongoing crisis on the border between Russia and Ukraine. Our Home Security Editor, Mark White, has this report.
Training for urban warfare. These are some of the 250 British troops currently stationed in Poland. They'll soon be joined by another 350 Royal Marines who are preparing to head out to Poland in the days ahead. In nearby Estonia, another 900 British troops have been training with NATO colleagues. It is a British show of solidarity with its allies in the region, as Russia shows no sign of reducing its military build-up on the border with Ukraine. Boris Johnson will take that message of solidarity with him to Poland as he meets troops and political counterparts there this morning. His foreign and defence secretaries will continue the diplomatic efforts in Moscow. The UK's former Chief of the General Staff said despite the continued Russian military build-up, he's confident a diplomatic solution will be found.
I believe this was always a situation where Putin was going to assemble force, he was going to intimidate, he was going to bully, he was going to threaten, and he's actually in a much stronger position like that. If he moves in, the Ukrainians will fight, the body bags will flow back to Russia, and he will be in a Chechnya, Georgia type situation.
More Russian naval forces are continuing their transit towards the Black Sea, despite claims by the French president that he'd secured assurances from Vladimir Putin that there would be no further military escalation, claims rejected by the Kremlin.
For the British government, there is a tricky balance to be struck. Yes, of course, keep up the diplomacy, hence the Foreign and Defence Secretary's visits to Moscow. But they also don't want to be seen to be rewarding Russian aggression. That's why this visit to Poland by the Prime Minister is seen as vital in offering full support to understandably nervous allies in the region.
And in the meantime, Britain is also continuing to send more military assistance to Ukraine in the form of weapon systems like these anti-tank missiles.
Today we have the honour to receive yet another plane which arrived from Britain. All our efforts are focused on making sure the enemy understands that Ukraine is supported by our partners, and we feel this support on all levels.
As Russia continues with what it claims are scheduled military manoeuvres, Ukraine today begins its own large-scale exercises along its eastern border. With so much in the way of rival firepower within sight of each other, the risk of miscalculation is ever present. Mark White, GB News.
Joining us now in the studio, Home Affairs and Security Editor Mark White to share his thoughts on all of this. So the reinforcements are on their way, but for what? Do you actually sense there is any more ramping up of the situation?
I think the difficulty is always in these situations is when you get a build-up of troops, and it's obvious that Vladimir Putin is building up these troops as a form of coercion to bully and intimidate his neighbour Ukraine, to get international attention, to get world leaders around the table, to address the issues that he and the Russian people have had for a long time, which is the eastward, as they see it, the eastward expansion of NATO and their absolute determination that Ukraine, which has such a special place in the hearts of Russian people, should not become a member of NATO. That's his end goal. Of course, no one in NATO, no Western leader is going to say, well, yes, of course, Ukraine's never going to join NATO. That's up to the Ukrainian people at the end of the day as a sovereign nation. And that's where we are.
But what difference does it make if Ukraine joins NATO? I mean, what difference does it make to NATO? Why agitate Russia in this particular way, is what I'm saying?
I think the difficulty is you're giving in then to bullying and intimidation by a big superpower like Russia on its weaker neighbour. Now, I say its weaker neighbour. Ukraine still has a very significant armed force, and Vladimir Putin knows if he was to move in to try in any significant way to move into Ukraine, he would be met with fierce resistance. They have a standing army of some 250,000 people and plenty of reservists, and of course a desire on their part not to be taken over by Russia, and so they would fight to the last.
I suppose you can't really reason with an unreasonable person, but I can't help but question all the while, what does Putin stand to gain from this? Because he's not going to get what he wants, which is to stop NATO from getting into Ukraine, for the reasons you just explained, right? He's not one for backing down, so diplomacy doesn't seem to me like he's going to go, OK, guys, I was being a bit unreasonable. So it's going to end in bloodshed, but what's the benefit to him? Is this all about trying to bolster his polls, his popularity at home? I can't quite understand what the end game is for him.
I know, you'd have to get into the mind of the grandmaster chess player himself to know exactly what he's trying to gain from this. But any concessions he can get from the West, I guess, is a win for him. And also, don't forget, it serves him well to be able to divide, as he sees it, some of the European leaders, because you've got Germany and France, to a lesser degree, taking a different tack to that of the UK and the United States, who are being very clear to the Russians that if you do anything to move into Ukraine in any way, shape or form, we will hit you hard with sanctions.
Except Russia has a big mate. They have a new friend, and they say, you hit us my mate will sort you out. And over their shoulder is China.
Yeah, and there seems to be some kind of an agreement that nothing would happen with regards to Ukraine in a military sense while the Beijing Olympics are underway at the moment. So, hey, who knows what will happen at the end of it. It was interesting to hear from the former Chief of the General Staff, Lord Dannett, who I spoke to yesterday. He is of the belief that, this was always about trying to, appear aggressive, to threaten the possibility of invasion with a view to getting those Western leaders round the table. And he believes that diplomacy will win through. But it is a difficult balancing act for the likes of the British government, because obviously you've got the Foreign Secretary in Moscow today. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is heading out to Moscow tomorrow. And at the same time, then you've got the Prime Minister sending another message, which is a message of support to understandably very worried allies like Poland, like Estonia, like all of those nations in Eastern Europe who, should things descend into any significant conflict in Ukraine, will be, without a doubt, affected very significantly. There's no way it wouldn't spill over the borders of Ukraine.
It is absolutely incredible how the Russian situation mirrors the Nazi Germany situation of 1939 to 45. And, people thinking, well, he won't invade Poland, he won't invade Czechoslovakia, he won't do this. And actually, we're now going to these peripheral countries and we're saying, hey, don't worry, this has happened to you before. This time it could be Russia crossing your borders.
Yeah, and there's a school of thought as well, with so much talk in recent months, because remember, these troops have been building up on the Ukrainian border for months now. So much talk from Western leaders in particular about an invasion being imminent. If Vladimir Putin doesn't do anything at the end of the day, is he going to appear weak? Well, I don't know. The calculus is his in terms of what he's hoping to gain in the way of concessions from the West. But I think the very fact that he had Emmanuel Macron there earlier this week, that he's got the UK Foreign Secretary and the Defence Secretary heading out there as well, that he has other world leaders and their senior government ministers heading out. He is on the international stage getting the kind of attention that he's not had for some very considerable time. So that is a win for him, without a doubt.
But of course, Eamonn mentions what happens, China is watching everything. They're also watching because of what happens in Taiwan. And the eyes of the world history, I suppose, will really judge us on the way we handle the threat of these very undemocratic bullies, really, on the world stage.
I think that's a very pertinent point, actually, looking at China as well as the situation. You've got two very significant powers that have the ability and have demonstrated in the case, of course, of Russia invading or annexing Crimea in 2014. And then, of course, also with the Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine and the Donbass fighting this insurgency for the last 8 years. They've shown a willingness and a potential. China, exactly, very bellicose about Taiwan. And what do the Western powers do if Russia invades Ukraine? No one thinks that Western powers are going to go in directly to Ukraine's aid. They're not. The most they're doing is what you're seeing at the moment with missile systems and alike being sent from the United States and the UK into Ukraine to help them in that way. They're training their military in the use of these anti-tank missiles.
I know, but you said to me 5 minutes ago you're dealing with a significant power in Ukraine, massive army, whatever, but yet they're going around begging for weaponry.
Yeah, well, they're a lot better equipped than they were, but I mean, they're up against 110, 120, 30,000 people, soldiers from the Russian army on the Russian-Ukraine side of the border. On the Belarus-Ukraine side, there's another 30,000. It's a very significant army that they're up against. Yeah. They do need the equipment, they do need the manpower. It would be a bloody quagmire that Vladimir Putin would be sending his troops into. There is no doubt about it.
Okay.
And Lord Dannett, as I say, for one, is hopeful that the diplomacy will win at the end of the day. Let's hope he's right.
Yeah, it's all very sobering. Mark White, as ever. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Look, we're going to take a break there, and as we were saying to you, we've got the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace standing by ahead of his trip to Moscow tomorrow, right after this.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update. I'm Alex Deakin. It's been a pretty lively night across parts of Scotland. Snow showers packing in and very blustery conditions here. We do have Met Office warnings in place. For details of those, check out the Met Office website. But this area of low pressure has been bringing the lively conditions. The isobars are really squeezing together, so getting very windy at the moment, particularly through the central belt, and then later this morning across eastern Scotland. Snow showers packing in as well. Ice is a risk across Northern Ireland, where the showers are falling as snow on the hills, but mostly rain to lower levels. Across Scotland, the showers will turn a bit more back to rain, but still over the hills, snow showers combined with those strong winds. That means blizzards and the potential for further disruption really throughout the day. Further south, it's by and large a fine day. A few showers across northern England, but much of the middle and southwards dry and bright. A bit colder than recent days, and it certainly feels colder with those strong winds across the northern half of the UK. Still very blustery, with more showers to come across northeast England into this evening, but generally the weather calming down overnight. Clear skies, lighter winds will allow a pretty extensive frost to form. Certainly rural areas dropping well below freezing. A few snow showers continuing in northern Scotland, so again potentially icy here through tomorrow morning, but for most, tomorrow is going to be a beautifully crisp winter's day. Yes, it'll be cold and frosty to start with, but we'll have plenty of blue sky around. It will cloud over a little bit from the west, the sunshine turning hazy, maybe one or two showers in the west come Friday afternoon. But for most, tomorrow is going to be dry and bright with plenty of winter sunshine. Temperatures close to average, 6 to 8 or 9 Celsius, but the winds will be lighter. However, those lighter winds aren't going to last. High pressure bringing the fine weather on Friday is ousted by low pressure systems into the weekend. The isobars squidging together, so spells of wet and windy weather on the way for most of us this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
"17 minutes past 9 on this Thursday morning. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
In just a few moments' time, we will be speaking to the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. We're told he is standing by, just taking an important governmental phone call, no less. But in the meantime, we're going to bring back Mark White, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, to discuss some more
So
of
Ben
the
Wallace
issues
is
around
heading to Moscow tomorrow. So we've got Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, there today. At any stage, would Putin be involved in this, or does it not go to his level?
It's their counterparts, as far as we understand, in Moscow that they are meeting. If Boris Johnson was going, obviously he would be meeting Putin. But this is the diplomatic arm of the offensive. So you've got Boris Johnson, he's at NATO HQ in Brussels, and he's heading off to Poland. He's going to be meeting some of the 250, I think, British troops that are in Poland at the moment. Ben Wallace announced earlier this week that a further 350 troops, Royal Marines from 4-5 Commando at Royal Marine Base Condor up in Arbroath, are heading. There is a small detachment who've gone out already. Other troops are heading out there in the days ahead. Some suggestion as well that up to 1,000 more troops are on standby potentially to go to support NATO allies in that region. Hopefully Ben Wallace will be able to shed a bit more light on that. But as I say, he will be involved in the diplomatic side of the equation as he goes to Moscow and speaks to his counterpart over there.
And look, it's been a busy few days for these high-level meetings, hasn't it? Ben Wallace himself having just come back from Poland and, as you say, off to Moscow tomorrow. We've seen Olaf Scholz in Washington this week with President Biden. And people at home are wondering, well, why do I care? Why does this all matter to me? Obviously, it's of a big concern to the neighbouring countries. But of course, there are all these concerns about energy prices and the implications of that. Interesting this week that we heard President Biden come out and say, if Russia invades Ukraine, the gas pipeline from Russia into Germany, Nord Stream 2, it's over. Well, and I was interested that America thought they could unilaterally call that.
Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of implications should this descend into conflict. Of course, there is the energy in the form of this gas that is coming via this pipeline into the European Union. Not much of it finds its way here, but of course, if European allies find that they don't have gas, they're going to be scrambling around in the same marketplace that the UK looks for its gas as well. So there will be a general shortage in supplies. Prices will be up again.
Well, Mark, we're now told the Defence Secretary is available for us to talk to, so we cross over to Westminster to speak to the Secretary of State for Defence. Let's see him. There we go. Ben Wallace, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning. Hello.
Busy week, obviously, for you. Busy day today. Tomorrow, you're off to Moscow.
Yes, I am. I mean, I've visited 11 countries over the last 2 weeks, both our NATO allies and our non-NATO allies, such as Sweden and Finland. It's incredibly important that in the face of what we see on the Ukrainian border, that Western Europe and Europe overall stands by its values and is seen to be working together.
OK, and how confident are you that a diplomatic resolution can be reached? Obviously, that's the ambition, that's the aim, but concerns are growing by the day, aren't they? Tobias Ellwood saying he thinks invasion is imminent.
Well, I mean, I think what Tobias is picking up on quite rightly is that the direction of travel of Russian forces is the wrong way. We've seen an increasing in battalion tactical groups. They've now got over half of the whole of Russia's ground combat capability on the borders of Ukraine and in Belarus, and we've seen more aircraft move to Belarus. So what we've seen is a wrong direction in the actions of the Russian military. But on the plus side, we saw President Macron obviously go to the Kremlin, and my colleague Liz Truss is there today, and we are still trying to explore whether we can find a solution. The Minsk agreement is a very important agreement between Ukraine and Russia that gives us some hope, but we have to have both deterrence and dialogue, and that's what we're trying to do.
The question is, I suppose, Secretary of State, are we, the UK, the West, doing enough to try to achieve that? I'm quoting President Putin here about President Macron, and Putin says, I see how much efforts the current leadership of France and the President personally is applying in order to solve the crisis related to providing equal security in Europe for a serious historical perspective. What is, if anything, Mr. Macron doing that we're not?
He's not really doing anything different. Of course, it's always in President Putin's interest to try and sow division within Europe and NATO. That is something that's a very deliberate policy, and using language deliberately to sort of drive wedges is in the Russian playbook. Look, President Macron, as a member of NATO, one of the leading members of NATO, and us, we all act in concert. NATO sent a collective response to the Russian demands, and that includes French and British signatures to it. President Macron, Prime Minister, speaks regularly. The United States as allies. This has been a collective effort. President Macron does have a longer relationship with President Putin. They visited each other on a number of occasions, and that's really important. The man who speaks to President Putin more than anyone is the President of Finland, who I visited only a few weeks ago. He is not in NATO, but is a wise hand on dealing with the Kremlin, and it's really important that we therefore play to our strengths, work together. But President Macron isn't going out on a limb. He's not doing anything different. And while the Kremlin might want to paint that, the simple reality is what is not negotiable is NATO's open door policy and our values that says we respect the sovereign right of a country to choose its alliances and to have freedom of its choice. In fact, the value of freedom to choose is actually more important by what these countries choose, and we will all stand up for that, whether that's for a NATO country or a non-NATO country.
The Prime Minister heading to Poland today. He's doing so via Brussels. He's meeting with Jens Stoltenberg there, the General Secretary of NATO. But interestingly, Sir Keir Starmer, the first Labour leader to make such a visit to NATO, is also going to Brussels today. And he's done an interview in the papers today saying that the Prime Minister is making unity on Ukraine hard. He's turning up at these big international bilateral meetings. And the first question he's asked at any of these interviews is about being ambushed by cakes or Partygate, and that continues in the papers here today. It's not the first time we've had to ask a member of the Cabinet about a Downing Street party when there are far more serious issues going on. Has he got a point?
No, he hasn't. And look, I have a lot of respect for Keir Starmer, and in fact, I have facilitated many of these visits for Keir and his team because, it is very important that the Parliament is united and he understands the threat. Only day before yesterday, I was briefing him in the building behind me. So I think it's a wrong comment. I think it's not a necessary comment he made because actually my experience of all those countries I visited, standing side by side, I had my Polish counterpart here on Monday. I met the Lithuanian Prime Minister later in the week. No one raises the Prime Minister in those terms at all, because what we all realise is that as governors, as people who govern our countries, the first thing we have is a duty to secure our people. The second thing is to get through COVID, two of which the Prime Minister is leading in and actually making a difference. And so I think if Keir Starmer travelled a bit more, he'd discover that the real issues are, at the moment for all those other nations, the real issues are the consequences of Russia invading Ukraine, and what it means for our values, and also the other part, which would be how we're going to get through COVID.
Secretary of State, we've got 20 seconds left on the programme. We've also already got a few hundred troops out there in Eastern Europe. You, as a serving officer, will know what it's like to be on standby, waiting for the call. How far are you prepared to go in reserve in terms of sending troops? Apparently there's 1,000 troops in reserve. Would you hesitate in sending them if needed?
We wouldn't hesitate once we know that they are ready and they're professional enough, and we know they are, then that means we can do as we say. And I think the key of a professional armed forces is to show that we do what we say, that we can deliver what we promise. The British Armed Forces are one of the best in the world at doing that, and we'll be able to do it.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Ben Wallace, Secretary of State for Defence. Appreciate your time today. Safe journey and good negotiating for
we wish
tomorrow.
You well.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you to him, and thank you to you for keeping us company this morning. We will be back tomorrow, 6 o'clock till 9:30. Perhaps a little bit bleary-eyed. We're out tonight, aren't we?
She's talked me to going out. We're going out.
Got him an invite.
Going out, but maybe we'll just come straight into work tomorrow. The briefing with Tom Harwood is up next. Hopefully, see you in the morning. Have a good day.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update. I'm Alex Deakin. It's been a pretty lively night across parts of Scotland. Snow showers packing in and very blustery conditions here. We do have Met Office warnings in place. For details of those, check out the Met Office website. But this area of low pressure has been bringing the lively conditions. The isobars are really squeezing together, so getting very windy at the moment, particularly through the central belt, and then later this morning across eastern Scotland. Snow showers packing in as well. Ice is a risk across Northern Ireland, where the showers are falling as snow on the hills, but mostly rain to lower levels. Across Scotland, the showers will turn a bit more back to rain, but still over the hills, snow showers combined with those strong winds. That means blizzards and the potential for further disruption really throughout the day. Further south, it's by and large a fine day. A few showers across northern England, but much of the middle and southwards dry and bright. A bit colder than recent days, and it certainly feels colder with those strong winds across the northern half of the UK. Still very blustery, with more showers to come across northeast England into this evening, but generally the weather calming down overnight. Clear skies, lighter winds will allow a pretty extensive frost to form. Certainly rural areas dropping well below freezing. A few snow showers continuing in northern Scotland, so again potentially icy here through tomorrow morning, but for most, tomorrow's going to be a beautifully crisp winter's day. Yes, it'll be cold and frosty to start with, but we'll have plenty of blue sky around. It will cloud over a little bit from the west, the sunshine turning hazy, maybe one or two showers in the west come Friday afternoon, but for most, tomorrow's going to be dry and bright with plenty of winter sunshine. Temperatures close to average, 6 to 8 or 9 Celsius, but the winds will be lighter. However, those lighter winds aren't going to last. High pressure bringing the fine weather on Friday is ousted by low pressure systems into the weekend. The isobars squidging together, so spells of wet and windy weather on the way for most of us this weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day.